Sabby, is my lighting okay? This is the first interview I've done in this place I just moved to.
I think it looks fine to me.
Looks okay. Okay, right on. Thank you. How have you been since we talked last?
I've been good, just really busy.
I've been seeing you all blowing up. It's exciting to watch. Give me like a 30-second warning. I'm just trying to tidy up back here so the shot has less clutter in it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the intro will play first.
Okay.
Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo.
All right, guys. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight, you know him, you've seen him on here before, Shahid Buttar. He's a lawyer and activist, but a lot of you probably know him from challenging Nancy Pelosi. Welcome back, Shahid. How have you been?
I'm doing all right, Sabby. It's great to be with you again.
Awesome. So, of course, I'm sure you've heard that Nancy Pelosi has announced that she is running for re-election. And I have two clips I want to show. But before we get into that, I want to get your take on this because, Nancy Pelosi, she's up there in age. She's like in her 80s. Obviously, she can retire if she wants to. Why do you feel she's running for re-election?
Power, ultimately. I wrote an article about a week ago about gerontocracy and the phenomenon a lot of people are decrying, how everyone in Washington is old. Ultimately, we're a nation run by octogenarians in a time of profound civilizational crisis that they generally engineered. And so hoping that the 80-year-olds who engineered the climate crisis, who engineered the upward transfer of wealth, who engineered every war for profit that we've endured for the last generation, the idea that they're going to find our way out of it, to me, is laughable. But at the end of the day, it's not public service. It's power and greed, as far as I can tell. I'd be thrilled to be proven otherwise if any of these folks want to show up for work sometime. But
I hear you. So just to be clear, so people understand, you're not running against Nancy Pelosi this time. Absolutely
not. No, my time in electoral politics is behind me, and I'm grateful to have found more peaceful and kinder pursuits to which to dedicate myself. And I'm grateful that time's behind me.
Awesome. So I want to get to this first clip here from Case Study QB, because even Chuck Todd apparently was surprised that Nancy Pelosi was running again for office. So I want to play this clip first.
Let's talk about Nancy Pelosi momentarily. There's been suggestions that she may be delaying a exit from Congress to help out her daughter, Christine Pelosi, who is believed to be interested. She's a DNC committee woman, active in the Democratic Party here in this state. But it still gives the notion of this octogenarian government. She'll be well into her, 83 or 84. Was that a surprise when she decided to seek another term?
I am surprised by this because of the Dianne Feinstein situation, of which she is intimately involved in right now, because another daughter of hers is helping out with this situation. So look, no matter how we talk about this, someone's going to accuse me of being an ageist here. But I will tell you this, there is, in some circles in Washington, relief that she's going to run again, because there is a lot of people that rely on her still, particularly her fundraising chops, and frankly, her ability to persuade House members at times when you need it, right? But then again, there's a point where, I'm letting go of something, right? Voluntarily. I'm not going to, you do at the last minute, you want to hang on to it, right? You understand the feeling. But, the beauty of a democracy, the whole point of a democracy is nobody's irreplaceable. And I think the message unintentionally that McConnell and Pelosi and Biden might be sending here is that, but no, we're too big to replace, or we're too old to replace, however you want to look at it, we're too experienced. And it really runs counter to the whole point of democracy.
Okay, that piece right there where he is actually talking about this fact that because they're older and they've been in these positions for quite a long time, that there seems to be this perception that you cannot challenge us. We're just going to maintain these seats that we have. And then also, I want to get your take on that, but I also want to get your perspective about Nancy Pelosi's daughter. Last time you were here, you tried to warn all of us that she was next in line. And now we see Chuck Todd on Meet the Press talking about her daughter as well.
Yeah, it's been an open secret in San Francisco for over a decade that the Pelosi's long-term plan was to groom Christine to replace Nancy in the House. I mean, Christine sat on the Democratic National Committee at the national level for years, and her only qualification is that she is her mother's daughter. And so, tell me what to read from those tea leaves. As to the fact that anybody is surprised about this, I never cease to be astounded by the ignorance of particularly journalists. And Chuck Todd's not alone in indicating surprise. There have been writers from the LA Times to New York City to every newspaper in San Francisco who, for the entire 6 years that I ran for Congress, kept publishing pieces about who's going to follow Nancy Pelosi. Is it going to be her daughter? Is it going to be Scott Wiener? Meanwhile, there's an active race with actual candidates who are running and they never name us. And, I've talked to some of them who sort of admitted their own confusion and sort of like regret at, basically writing clickbait to the exclusion of journalism. But the idea that anybody's surprised by this, I've been saying this for 6 years. It's not in any way unpredictable. It requires immense naivete or complicity to presume the powerful people will voluntarily give way. And every writer in San Francisco over the last 6 years has been imagining that she's going to gracefully retire. And then it's going to either go to, there's a state senator who's been angling for her seat. The former chair of the city's Democratic Party wanted her seat. Her daughter wants her seat. But none of these people, of course, have the political independence to run against the incumbent. They're all waiting for her to gracefully retire. But there's no reason to imagine that she ever will. Right? Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden himself, certainly Trump, all of them reflect this dynamic of elderly people, all of whom are wealthy, all of whom could certainly spend time with their family if they so chose. But what do? They use their power and privilege to lord it over the rest of us, deny Americans basic human rights, promote wars of unprovoked aggression around the world. It takes profound ignorance of history and the modus operandi of the people that we're talking about for journalists to presume that Pelosi was ever going to retire. And I just, see it as yet another demonstration of the failure, co-optation, complicity of the press. Choose your verb there, or adverb, I suppose. I don't see the press in any way in the United States as continuing to serve its constitutional function. And it seems to me to be a strategic misinformation lever. And it certainly has been with respect to the future of this seat for the last half decade. And, I don't know if that's an aberration. I certainly was paying a lot of attention during that time and was astounded to see the ignorance of these journalists. And it wasn't the only way it revealed itself, unfortunately. But ultimately, the extent to which the public has no idea what's going on in Washington, either behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, who's saying what they actually stand for. Like if San Francisco understood what Nancy Pelosi's record has been, she would have been voted out of Congress decades ago, but she's never debated anyone in 35 years. And the press has never held her accountable for ducking debates. What the press in San Francisco has been effectively done is sort of serve as a establishment reinforcement lever That's how Kamala Harris found her way to Washington. And, it doesn't surprise me that Chuck Todd is surprised, but I certainly am disappointed. And I think everybody else should be too, and perhaps find better, more credible, independent, trustworthy sources from which to find their news.
Do you know if there's another? I know you're not running against Nancy again, but do you know if there's another progressive that may be running against her?
I not only have no idea, but I wouldn't trust anyone who calls themselves progressive in that city. As an immigrant of color, the worst racism I've ever encountered in my life was from San Franciscans who called themselves progressives. And, anybody running in the Democratic Party ultimately is going to be beholden to it. And, I tried to run against the party from within it, and I discovered what happens to you. And, I think anybody who pays attention to history will frankly choose another party to run under, despite the disadvantages it presents in a one-party city. I was sort of recognizing that San Francisco was a one-party city, made a decision to try to run within that party banner, and discovered that there's no limit to the depth of the mendacity and, the ethics of the people in that party. And having discovered that, I really would not trust any, at least Democrat, who calls themselves progressive.
That's right. And I want people to understand that regardless of who jumps into the race, it does appear to me that her daughter has already been selected. So we're looking at like a potential political dynasty here, because there's also Gavin Newsom, which a lot of people may not be aware, but Gavin Newsom is related to Nancy Pelosi by marriage. And people keep throwing his name into the ring in reference to the presidential race for 2024 in the event that Joe Biden has to bow out for whatever reason. So I've always seen political dynasties as a dangerous thing. I don't like political candidates being selected, and it does sound like her daughter has already been selected.
If anything, I dare say you undersell the point, because Pelosi was herself selected in 1987 by the then incumbent. And remember, her dad was the mayor of Baltimore in an era when it was infamously mobbed up, and her brother served in Congress. And she absolutely was the sort of shepherd of Kamala Harris's bid to be Biden's vice president. Pelosi is not only, you described it as a potential political dynasty. This is a well-entrenched political dynasty now aiming to consolidate itself from its second to its third generation. And, I presented the strongest challenge it's ever faced. I'm grateful to have done that. I'm grateful for the 80,000 people who voted for change in San Francisco, and the 50,000 people around the country who chipped in to try to make that happen, in spite of the bias and smears of the establishment and the refusal of power to even show up for a debate. And I would like to just briefly connect Pelosi to Biden and Trump here. None of these people have the willingness to show up and defend their ideas in public. Every single one of them ducks debates on both sides of the aisle, and they've been doing this for years. And the idea that we live in a democracy when the power holders aren't required to defend their ideas in public, to me, is laughable at the outset. Even if we didn't have political dynasties, even if we didn't have legalized election buying, right? I mean, there's more than one way to rig an election. You don't have to do it at the ballot box. You can do it in the editor's office. You can do it at the bank, right? I mean, that's what Citizens United represented ultimately, was the legal right for corporations and rich people to buy elections in this country. And the idea that we have a democracy in the face of what ultimately is, and political scientists often present them as a line, but a very conflicting principle of capitalism. We live in a society dedicated to, ruled by, and service to capital, not the people of the United States. And Pelosi herself is a perfect representative of that. Someone who's grown fantastically wealthy in Congress, particularly through leveraging inside information she's gained as a policymaker to trade stocks and equities on her and her family's behalf. The information that the public does not have access to, basically rigging a different game, having been selected for a seat in Congress that she's held for 35 years without ever answering public questions, certainly not questions from an informed critic. After all that, she's been profiting on the back end while denying Americans healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, while serially voting for every illegal war in the last 35 years, while particularly playing a critical role in supporting the emergence of the mass surveillance apparatus. That was the original reason that drove me to run for Congress. And, I spent 20 years trying to fight the edifice that she has particularly put her fingerprints all over. And, witnessing the constitutional crisis, the loss of the First and Fourth Amendments at the hands of the national security state, to which Democrats have thoroughly committed themselves, words fail me. I don't even know what to say. It's more than disappointing. It is dejecting. It's enough to have driven me out of politics. I lost all hope for the future, recognizing how co-opted electoral politics is and how corrupt the people in power are and how ignorant journalists and the public remain about any of it. And, I hope to be proven wrong, but as far as I can tell, might makes right in Washington, and capital is its contemporary equivalent. And Washington answers whoever has capital. And as a nearly billionaire herself with ill-begotten gains at the cost of people both around the United States and around the world who've had to bear the brunt, the consequences of her self-serving decisions, I just hope San Francisco at some point can wake up and smell the coffee and hopefully make some better decisions on behalf of all of us.
Well, we're going to hear from Nancy Pelosi herself here about her decision to run for re-election. So let me just take the captions off here. It's interesting what she gives for the excuse. Listen to this, everyone.
In any case, I feel very exhilarated by the encouragement I had to continue representing my great city of San Francisco. You have the White House behind you. I have homes in San Francisco behind me, and that is my strength. And the needs that our city had right now really call for me to stay another term. I had the privilege of representing San Francisco for a long time, and they have given me the latitude to serve as speaker, as leader for over 20 years, and whip as well. Visit 87 countries, served 30 years on the Intelligence Committee, all of those things. But at the same time, being central to my service was representing my district. In gratitude.
Let's just pause here for a second. I want to get your opinion about this, Shahid, when she talks about serving the needs of the people in her district in San Francisco, because as I've been reading more recently, San Francisco's crime rate has increased. The homelessness rate has continued to increase. And I also just saw an article recently where they were advising more employees to work remotely from home, I guess because of the crime rate. All these years that she's been in office, it doesn't sound like the conditions for people in San Francisco have improved. So how is she actually serving the people in her district?
Right. I mean, San Francisco is crumbling as far as I can tell. And I just want to push back on the idea that crime is the problem there. The problem in San Francisco, like the rest of the country, is that of capitalism run amok. It is, as far as I can tell, the most racist city in the country. And I'll back that up with 3 different data points. The first is that San Francisco, over the last generation, has lost 3/4 of its Black population. Now, people will, try to defend the city and say, oh, that's just market-based discrimination. That's why King described racism and capitalism as intersecting evils, right? The market effectuates racism, and you can see it in the composition of the city. First point. Second, Hunters Point, Bayview, it's the last Black enclave in San Francisco. It was poisoned by the federal government, the U.S. Navy, for decades. They built the bombs there that the Pentagon exploded over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only weapons of mass destruction used against civilian populations in human history by Washington. They were built in San Francisco in what is now the last Black enclave in the city, and they poisoned everyone in it with radiation poisoning. They have the worst breast cancer rates and asthma rates in the country. It's a Superfund site. No one in the city can do anything about it. I have heard everyone in city government wring their hands and plead, they wish the federal government could do something. They've had the most powerful member of the House of Representatives for 35 years. And they want to tell me that somebody can't do something about it, right? I mean, San Francisco has had problems, and they're not recent. And the people who've borne the worst of it have never been represented, certainly not by an insider trading oligarch. What San Francisco most needs, which I think the rest of the country also needs, is a right to health care. And there's no one who has more prolifically stood in the way of that. Otherwise, I think inevitable reform than the proud, supposedly progressive representative from the supposedly progressive city of San Francisco. Where I really get, frankly pissed off is hearing people refer to Pelosi's service on the Intelligence Committee and her service in the party leadership. And I've made this point before, but I want to make it really squarely. Democrats have been so co-opted by the national security state that I frankly don't see them in any way as the lesser of any evils now. There was an era when Democrats were the anti-war movement. That was the wing of the Democratic Party that sent Obama to Washington in 2008, only to then watch him get rolled by the Pentagon. But those years of service on the Intelligence Committee that Pelosi was talking about were enabling coups and interventions in countries around the world. These are coups, mind you, that continue to this day, right? Like in the last year, the Pentagon has enabled a coup in Niger, a constitutional coup in Pakistan. When I was running for office, this happened in Bolivia and Venezuela, but no one would talk about it as CIA coups, right? We're going to wait for historians to figure it out a generation from now. The people who are supposed to be watching this stuff, the people who are supposed to stop the NSA from co-opting the internet as a tool for global surveillance, they're not only asleep at the switch, they're not only actively complicit, they're getting rich off of it. And that does frankly piss me off. It pissed me off enough 6 years ago to light myself on fire and enter an electoral arena. It pisses me off enough today to be very grateful that I'm over it. I wish more people were pissed off ultimately, because you frankly can't pay attention to the events in Washington and around this country and around the world and not be pissed off, right? If the indigenous capital of Hawaii burning to the ground, due to ultimately, meteorological events that are driven by a climate catastrophe that these people in Washington have been engineering for half a century, while we've had more than a century's worth of warnings, it is outrageous. And I don't understand why any of these people still have their jobs. But, again, this gets back to the point of whether we live in a democracy or not, which I think is, a cruel joke at this point.
That's right. And you notice all of them are using that excuse, though, right? A lot of the politicians in DC right now are using the excuse, we have to protect our democracy. Like they all have that PR talking point. As if meanwhile, like the Democratic Party or the DNC is changing the rules so that Biden's primary challengers cannot fairly win in states like New Hampshire, Iowa, and Georgia. But we have to protect that good old democracy.
Right. I mean, it's like, democracy at the barrel of the gun or whatever we describe it as in foreign policy. They're now importing that notion of, performative, ultimately authoritarianism with performative political elements for the populace. And they're calling that democracy, but that's not what democracy is. And to call what we have in this country, bought and paid for by the highest dollar democracy, it offends, I think, the very principle of rule by the people, for, of, and by the people. That was the vision. And yes, the founders had a very restrictive vision of which people, but we've thankfully expanded that over time. When I look at America today, I don't see the people's influence anywhere in government. One of the most recent articles I wrote on Substack was about this, the constitutional side of the gerontocracy coin. People focus on, it's old people running the country who don't even have, awareness of their own absence, in the case of Dianne Feinstein, for a month from the Senate. People are so oblivious, they don't know where they are or where they've been, but they, somehow have the authority to block judicial appointments, block treaties with foreign governments, hold up crucial pieces of legislation. There's this very unfortunate corruption that has taken hold in Washington. I see it in both parties. I see Pelosi as an example of it. I see the press and its role in keeping people in the dark about that structural erosion, part of this crisis in democracy. And frankly, I think democracy needs defending. I wish any of these people who talked about it would show up. But, at the end of the day, what they're all defending is capitalism, not democracy. Whenever you hear Washington talk about democracy in the foreign policy context, it's always about promoting and defending capitalism, not democracy. We were not invading Vietnam to defend democracy. We were invading Vietnam to preserve Washington's access, or Wall Street's access, to markets. Same story in Iraq, same story in Afghanistan. I dare say it's the same story in Eastern Europe. And this idea that any of these people have any idea what democracy even means is preposterous. as far as I can tell. If she understood what democracy meant, she might have wanted to use some of that time on the Intelligence Committee to protect the rights of her constituents instead of selling them away to the highest corporate bidder. And at the end of the day, the most crucial principles that enable democracy are transparency and accountability. And at the moment, we have none of them, right? I mean, there is a publisher currently facing a bipartisan prosecution. He has been for the last 10 years for the crime of exposing military cover-ups about military crimes. And that person, Julian Assange, has been the target of a bipartisan persecution and prosecution. Stephen Donziger, somebody spent time under house arrest for daring to stand up against ecocide. And I see the activists and trying to stop Cop City in Atlanta, one of them murdered, others of them being harassed and intimidated. This is a problem in Los Angeles, in Portland, when the DHS was deploying its goon squads and activists there were taking it on the chin. We are witnessing not, I would say, the rise of fascism, but more rather its overt consolidation. If fascism has been a problem in the United States for much longer, I think, than anybody cares to realize, and it certainly did not start with the last president.
Right.
And what I think people are recognizing is how bad it is. And, maybe the velvet glove is coming off and the iron fist is revealing itself. I'm not sure. But the idea that any of these figures in Washington who've been putting their pocketbooks and bank accounts before the public interest for decades care about democracy enough to defend it, or even understand it well enough to defend it, to me would be laughable if it weren't so serious that ultimately, the fates of 8 billion human beings around the world are implicated by it.
Well said. Well said. I'm going to go back to this video here. She's going to speak a little bit more here. Again, if you're just tuning in, Nancy Pelosi has announced that she is running for re-election.
To them for that, I have agreed to stay on another term in order to help meet the needs that we have now. We're a resilient city. We've had AIDS. We've had earthquakes. Of course, we've all had pandemic. We intend to come out of this resilient city that we are in even better. Now, at the same time, our democracy is at risk when we talk nationally. And globally, people are concerned about what it means if our democracy is at risk and what it means to the war in Ukraine and what it means to our relationships with NATO, and other alliances that we have. So I am motivated to do everything I can to win this election. I think it's urgent for our democracy, for our relationships worldwide, and more importantly, for every kitchen table discussion in our country about America's working families, to offset what the Republicans are trying to do. Right now, they're trying to undo the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which means they would raise the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. They would offset what we're doing to protect the planet from the climate crisis. So there's urgency in terms of my city, our issues here, and the global conflict between democracy and autocracy.
Did you notice that she said NATO and Ukraine, Shahid?
Yeah.
So it's
and she
almost
said
like
a lot of words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like she's giving away the big picture there to stay in there and to make sure that that doesn't change, that's protected. And they'll make it so that she will win again. Like, she may have a challenger here and there, but from personal experience what they'll do. Like you said, they don't even require her to debate, apparently not since the 80s. So she's there to make sure the status quo remains in place. And I'd say the same thing too about Dianne Feinstein. I mean, it's ridiculous. Dianne Feinstein doesn't even know where she's at. And people are telling her to vote, like, just vote no, or just do that. Like, this is very concerning. But people have to understand, I believe these people are there to protect the status quo. They don't want someone else to come in and fill that seat. They don't even want, in reference to Dianne Feinstein, they didn't even want Barbara Lee to take that seat, which was supposed to be the rumored replacement.
Yeah.
But again, they just select people.
They do just select people. I want to both offer a way in which democracy is threatened in a sort of subtle way that we haven't talked about by this pattern, and get back to Barbara Lee. So when you have folks who are in any way incapacitated, whether it's because they're old or they've had to have a medical procedure, who are reliant on staff, the whole basis for democratic theory kind of falls through the floor, because there's no electoral accountability for the staff of elected office holders. Only the office holders are elected. Only the office holders are beholden to the people. The staff have no accountability at all. And what the staff in Washington do, particularly I'm thinking about the staff at intelligence agencies, is outright criminal. And it has been. Since the emergence of these agencies, they've been engaged in secret crimes, whether it was mining the harbor in Nicaragua, whether it was on September 11th, 1973, toppling a democratically elected government in Chile, whether it was, contriving the case for the next preventable war, whether it was potentially assassinating presidents and presidential candidates or civil rights leaders. Any of these things are the unaccountable acts of people behind the curtain who cannot be seen by the public. And so when we have staff-driven legislative offices, that is a profound threat to the very nature of democracy in itself, even if they weren't, hella old, even if they weren't denying people human rights or, just as a separate vector. And then coming back to Barbara Lee was the only member of the House who tried to stop the Bush co-optation of 9/11 as a pretext to sell weapons and wage wars.
Yep.
And if there was anyone in Congress qualified to represent our state in Washington, it would be her. Yet our governor, Gavin Newsom, as you correctly noted before, somebody rumored to try to step in for Biden if the DNC wakes up and smells the coffee and realizes that he can't, win his way out of a paper bag, let alone a national election. Gavin Newsom recently said that to the extent he did appoint Barbara Lee to any Senate seat, it would be a caretaker appointment, which is so offensive to me for every kind of reason. I mean, remember how the Democrats talk about the black vote, or black women in particular, in the wake of the senatorial flips in Georgia a cycle ago, right? There's an open recognition that the Democratic Party relies on the black vote. I wrote a piece about this, focusing on Cornel West about maybe 3 or 4 months ago, how he is uniquely poised to expose the fraudulent nature of the Democratic reliance on the black vote, because at the same time that the party will do any number of performative things to try to appeal to the community, things like, for instance, make Juneteenth a national holiday. And I'm not, yes, that's important. It's great. It's symbolic. And it is particularly in the context of a continued upward transfer of wealth, with a Democratic president denying labor rights, right, and the right to strike, a Democratic president forcing student loans to go back into repayment, a Democratic president openly siding with capital against working people. Those measures, like creating a holiday for Juneteenth, they're ultimately just performative. And for the Democratic Party to have any accountability, I do think that the independence of the black vote is crucial in terms of forcing the party to heal, in terms of recognizing its ultimate responsibility to represent the people instead of corporations. And I see in Gavin Newsom's commitment to potentially appoint Barbara Lee only as a caretaker senator a reflection of the party's merely theatrical commitment to black people, their rights, and their interests. We shouldn't expect any better, but we should certainly demand it.
Right. That's right. Well said. There's one more question I have for you here, Shahid, and this is from Daniel. Brought up a really good point. Danny says, question for Shahid: does the fact that these octogenarians won't retire reflect their disdain for the masses, or the fact that they are ruled by their elite billionaire overlords? Thanks, Danny.
I'd say both. And maybe, like I was describing your question a little while ago, this one might be a little too charitable, because in some cases, like Nancy Pelosi's in particular, they are the overlords themselves. It's not her answering rich people. She's worth $250 million herself. So we see a merger of the billionaire class and the representatives, right? It's not as if they're, the strings that are pulling the representatives are being held by the representatives themselves. It sort of stretches the metaphor here, right? But yeah, I think it absolutely reflects disdain for the masses. It absolutely reflects disdain for working people. It absolutely reflects disdain for human rights. And it particularly reflects disdain for the very principle of democracy that they claim to defend. And I wish that the press would show up to observe that, because it's simply a matter of fact checking. But you know what I think of the press in the United States in this day and age, which is one reason why I'm so grateful for your work and your colleagues, and grateful to be with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Roger Meadows, for the super chat. Shahid, you want to change the system? It's bottoms up. Parties can't exist nationally without existing state level CBI amendment to abolish all parties in California. So Roger Meadows talks a lot about ballot initiatives. So you're in a ballot initiative state. I'm in a ballot initiative state. So he talks a lot about this. We've covered that a lot on the show as well. He's encouraging people. A lot of you are in California. Like a lot of you are there. He's encouraging people in California. He's like, you guys seem to have a lot of like corrupt politicians, and it's a very expensive state to live in. So he's encouraging people in California to do those ballot measures to try to stop some of this corruption. Thank you, Roger. Based. All right, Shahid. Well, where can people find you before you go, and what are you up to now?
Thanks for asking. I'm writing on Substack these days, so you can find my latest writing at shahidbuttar.substack.com. I cover bipartisan corruption in Washington and creative attempts to call it out. I work in seasonal industries outdoors now. I work as a kayak guide in the summer and a snowboard instructor in the winter. Got a DJ gig on the weekends. And like I said, I'm grateful to have found my way to pursuits that are more conducive to my happiness. I spend a lot of time trying to serve other people and kind of learn the hard way that no good deed goes unpunished. And I'm grateful for the chances to live my life finally. And it's kind of bizarre. I'm living out my adolescent dreams in my late 40s. So that's kind of where I'm at. And
hey, it's never too late.
If I could be an example for anything, let it be that principle for sure. It is never, in fact, too late.
All right. Thank you so much, Shahid.
Great to be with you. Keep up the great work.
Bye. All right, guys. Shahid Buttar. It's been a while since Shahid has been on, but he's always been very, very knowledgeable about Nancy Pelosi and the Pelosi's in general. So I definitely wanted to bring him back on to talk about this news of her running for re-election. It's ridiculous, right? I know some of you guys are just sitting here and you're like, I can't believe this woman is running again. I know. I know. All right. I'm going to shout out a couple of these comments. We will shout out patrons, and then I'll show the thumbnail. We'll get into our next story. Shout out to Jana Tyree. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Let's give Jana a big whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Thank you. Bakero says, didn't Dow renounce the DNC and the Democratic Party in 2020 and capitalism in 2022? We'll get into that, Barquero. Lana says Nancy needs to retire and not run again. Monarch says Cornel West himself hasn't shown any capitalist tendencies compared to Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr., but we'll see. Maybe Peter Dow is all it takes to screw Cornel, but I'm patient. We will get into all of that jazz. All right. Want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for keeping the lights on around this piece. You're doing the damn thing. Gotta shout you out. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, there's Sabbies. I don't know why I said that like that. Kind of in a silly mood today. And there's also members. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. All those lovely people. And I want to give a special shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for ENS, Stacy Collins, and Tillman. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. When I saw Stacy Collins, that reminded me of the woman. Who's the actress? Some of you, if you guys watch shows from the 80s, who's the actress? Something Collins. It'll come to me. I think she was on Dynasty or something. Maybe I'm thinking about a writer. I don't know. Anywho, let's go ahead and dive into that beautiful thumbnail and show you what else we're going to discuss tonight. We're also going to do call in. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, please go ahead and answer that poll. We'll reveal that poll question later on at the end of the show. All right. Tonight, we are discussing, yes, thank you, Joan Collins. That's who I was thinking of. Yes, Joan Collins. Tonight, we are discussing Cornel West campaign alert. You'll see there's Cornel West in the picture there, and that is Peter Dow, who is next to him in that picture. This has definitely stirred up quite a bit of controversy on Twitter, at least. I don't know about other social media, but we'll get into that as well. We're also going to discuss, or we did discuss, Nancy Pelosi is running for re-election again. We discussed that with Shahid Buttar. We're also going to discuss Joe Biden, uranium, and you'll notice there's a picture of Zelensky there right next to him. This is crazy news in reference to this war in Ukraine. And we're also going to discuss, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but PSL 2024 alert. These two women here, Claudia and Corinne, are running for president through the Party of Socialist Liberation, PSL. So we're going to talk about those young ladies tonight. And of course, like I said, we will do call in. So let's get started. It was just feels like a couple of weeks ago that we talked about the Biden administration making the terrible decision to send cluster ammunitions to Ukraine. Now, the problem with that type of ammunition is that it doesn't target just a distinct location. Obviously, it spreads, so that can hurt civilians. Well, now there is new information that says that Joe Biden has approved depleted uranium rounds to Ukraine. Now, why is this problematic other than the fact that it's war? Apparently, with uranium rounds, you have the issue of contamination for people in that area. So again, when people say that they want to save the lives of the Ukrainian people, I want you to take this segment when we clip it, send it to your friends or your family members who believe that that is the case. They believe that narrative, and send this to them. Because I want them to see, if you really care about the lives of Ukrainian people, you wouldn't try to poison the people in the area. Let's go ahead and get to this first clip here. This is from One. I like One.
And the top focus in World DNA this morning is what is happening on the battlefield in the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war. Well, US says that it will provide depleted uranium rounds to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Romania says that parts of Russian drone fell on its region. The question is, what exactly is happening? My colleague Haim breaks it down for you.
Thank you so much, Raisha. Right, as you mentioned, now the United States, it's saying that it will provide depleted uranium tank ammunition to Ukraine. Depleted uranium munitions are highly effective at piercing armor plate, but there is some controversy when it comes to this. The metal is toxic for the soldiers who use the weapons and for civilians in areas where they are fired.
So those weapons, again, they're not just toxic to the civilians, but also to the soldiers who are using those weapons. When they told you at the beginning of this war that they were willing to fight to the last Ukrainian, they really meant that. That means fighting until everyone is possibly dead. Just a reminder there.
While Romania stated that parts of possible Russian drone fell on its territory. Military experts opine that Ukraine's counteroffensive woes and continuing with recent gains a far cry from lightning successes last year. Now, the United States on Wednesday announced a $175 million military assistance package for Ukraine. The package includes anti-tank missiles, artillery, mortar rounds. The package also includes small arms, ammunition, and clearing obstacles. Since Russia's invasion in February last year, Ukraine has become far and away the top recipient of U.S. foreign aid. Now, during a visit to Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated that Washington would maximize efforts to support Ukraine. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba told Blinken that Washington's support was not charity. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Today, thanks to our partners, Ukraine is restraining Russia's aggression." Now, the U.S. package also includes, as I mentioned earlier, depleted uranium ammunition.
I want you to pay attention to the way that they worded that. They said that Ukraine is restraining Russia's aggression. Again, they're just, boy, I tell you, let's be very clear here. Ukraine is obviously not winning. CNN had to acknowledge this recently. Also, if the United States is continuing to send them weapons packages, that right there lets you know that they're losing. Like, think about this, people, right? So we have to pay attention to this. Like, one can be pretty good sometimes. One is the channel. They can be pretty good sometimes. Al Jazeera good sometimes. But even with them, I find that I have to correct a couple of things.
President Vladimir Putin has warned that he would deploy depleted uranium ammunition if Ukraine received the arms. Here's more on the deadly ammunition. Now, the 120-millimeter rounds are for M1 Abrams tanks that are expected to be delivered to Ukraine before the end of the year. Depleted uranium munitions are controversial due to their association with health problems such as cancer and birth defects in areas where they were used in past conflicts.
We're going to pause here for a second because we want to talk about the health problems. We have seen this as an issue in other countries as well. We have seen this as an issue in Vietnam, where it affected not just civilians, but also soldiers. We've talked about this before. We've seen this in countries such as Afghanistan. We've seen it in different areas of Palestine. Like, war is not, it's very profitable, obviously, but obviously it does come with terrible, terrible ramifications for the people, even after the war has ended. So the weapons that they're trying to use, these can cause health problems such as cancer, birth defects. Like, how is anybody okay with this? And why are more people calling out the Biden administration for approving this type of weapon package to go through? Ukrainian Americans, those who are living in this country, you should be bothered by this. Because we're talking, it could be 5, 10 years, 15 years down the line when people will have to deal with these health issues. Because once it's there, it's in the air. They're literally not, obviously, trying to save the Ukrainian people. They are making their lives worse. And I don't know, if people have money to flee Ukraine, but if you had money to flee Ukraine, you might want to do that right now. This is crazy. This is insane. And more people need to call out the Biden administration for this, but a lot of people are not. A lot of people are silent. But Joe Biden's doing such a great job, people. Isn't that what everyone's saying? Vote for Joe Biden. He's doing such a great job. Let's continue. And I have another clip I'm going to show you, too, of an interview from Democracy Now! About the situation as well.
However, they've not been definitively proven to have caused such issues. Now, the density of depleted uranium, a byproduct of the nuclear enrichment process, helps rounds containing it to punch through heavy armor, making it ideal for use in ammunition designed to target tanks. The first casualty of the Ukrainian counteroffensive was wishful thinking. Any hope that Russian troops would abandon their trenches and flee, that has now been left far behind on the battlefield. And here's what experts are saying on Ukraine's counteroffensive woes. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, U.S. officials told the New York Times that Kyiv, it's been deploying too many troops in the wrong places.
This is a mess. Deploying too many troops in the wrong places. This is an absolute mess. How long is this conflict going to continue, you guys?
Ukraine's best combat units are being sent equally to the east and the south when they should concentrate more in the south where heavy fighting normally occurs. By not consolidating its power in the right areas, the war-torn nation is reportedly struggling to achieve its main goal, which is of cutting off Russian supply lines in southern Ukraine by damaging the bridge that was connecting Moscow and the Crimean Peninsula. Now, analysts say that Melitopol and Berdyansk in...
We'll pause here. I want to take you back to this text right here. Ukraine is struggling to achieve its main goal of cutting off Russian supply lines in the south. Again, she kind of flies past this, but I just wanted to pause there and say that's just another example to show you that they're not winning. Just another example.
of cutting off Russian supply lines in southern Ukraine by damaging the bridge that was connecting Moscow and the Crimean Peninsula. Now, analysts say that Melitopol and Berdyansk in the south are far more strategically significant from fronts than Bakhmut in the east. Russia has increasingly tapped its Cold War arsenals, deploying tanks dating to the 1950s to replenish its early losses, and such old weapons can still perform very well. Russia has thousands of tanks. It's put many of them to use as stationary weapons in their defensive lines, including in the Zaporizhia region, where they have proved to be effective.
Russia has thousands of tanks. This is why this was a horrible idea. This whole idea, again, this is a NATO proxy war. This was a horrible idea. And by the way, I want to be very clear, especially for those of you that are part of my international audience. I personally, and I think many of you in the chat, I personally do not want any conflict with Russia. I do not want the U.S. to go to war with Russia. I don't want the U.S. to go to war with China. It's a big loser for us. We're talking about the possibility of World War III. And every weapon package that the U.S. government sends to Ukraine, that increases escalation. How long do you guys think that Vladimir Putin's just going to sit back and say, yeah, we'll just drag this out? How long? Because all he has to do, because honestly, if this goes on too long for him, all he has to do is knock on China's door and say, hey, can you come help me out? Then what do we do? All of this is happening under, I want to remind you, this is happening under Biden's administration. Now, let's be clear. Donald Trump still sent weapons to Ukraine too. Let's not sit back and pretend like he didn't. He did. But look at where we are now. Such a mess, such a mess. We'll continue and then we'll go to the interview of the gentleman on Democracy Now!
Relying on agents and collaborators, Moscow has been successful in repeatedly hitting Ukrainian military depots. Russia has stopped using battalion-sized tactical groups it deployed early in the war, and it's shifted now to smaller units. While the Russian Air Force, it's operated in relatively small numbers, it has modernized its stocks of bombs to turn them into gliding weapons that have proven to be efficient. The 500-kilogram bombs, adapted with a GPS module, it can inflict massive damage. Russian engineers, they've shown prowess in building field fortifications and complex obstacles along the front line. The obstacles include concrete reinforced trenches and command bunkers, wire entanglements, ditches, anti-tank hedgehogs or dragon's teeth, and complex minefields as well.
Okay, let's go ahead and pause there. Now let's go to this clip from Democracy Now! Where they talked about these uranium rounds as well. Again, we're talking about the U.S. government sending these types of weapons, which you could argue decades ago they didn't realize that these weapons caused health problems later on down the line as well. But they do know now. And they're still willing to send those weapons to other countries, to Ukraine. And they don't care if those people get sick. They don't care. What's the health insurance like in Ukraine? What are the healthcare services like? Because from what I heard, it's not good. So if you have multiple people developing types of cancer or birth defects, do they have the healthcare system strong enough to deal with those issues? These are things to think about. And then you'll hear about this in the history books 20 years from now, how the U.S. government caused these issues in Ukraine. And we're trying to tell you about it now. What's up, Danny? Shout out to Danny Haifong. Great program again at Sabby Sabs. Thank you so much, Danny. You guys should check out Danny's channel if you're not. I think a lot of you do watch Danny, but Danny covers geopolitics. He's really good on this stuff. We're going to go to this video here from Democracy Now! Alarming Biden to supply depleted uranium shells to Ukraine despite contamination risks. They really do not care about these people.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We turn now to Ukraine, where U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Kyiv on an unannounced visit to Ukraine, expected to announce a new package worth more than $1 billion in U.S. aid for Ukraine. This comes as the Biden administration is reportedly planning to announce it will, for the first time, send depleted uranium munitions to Ukraine, even though the weapons are radioactive and their use causes contamination that's hazardous to human health. Reuters reports the armor-piercing uranium munitions are part of a new military aid package for Ukraine set to be unveiled in the next week. This follows a previous decision by the Biden administration to arm Ukraine with cluster munitions, which have been banned by an international treaty ratified by more than 110 countries. This week, a new report by the Cluster Munition Coalition found 916 deaths and injuries from cluster bombs in Ukraine last year. Meanwhile, it was reported Monday one of the 14 so-called Challenger 2 tanks that Britain sent to Ukraine with the capacity to fire depleted uranium shells was destroyed in a battle with Russian forces.
Let me show you the health effects. This is one of the things I wanted to show you. Actually, let me go to the first picture because there's one of, okay, health effects of uranium. Now, this is on average, an average person. The bones, your brain, your lungs, of course, that's a giveaway. The spleen, pancreas, digestive tract, reproductive system. That's where we're talking about the birth defects. Your kidneys and your liver. You see this? All right. Now let's look at it for a pregnant woman. Now this is, look at this. Same thing. Brain, lungs, pancreas, digestive tract, reproductive system, kidneys, liver, spleen, your bones. Like this is, guys, this is poison. This is poison to these people. Let's continue.
Forces in the village of Robotyne, which Ukraine says its troops recently captured in its counteroffensive. For more, we go to London. We're joined by Phil Miller, chief reporter for Declassified UK, an independent media outlet that focuses on national security. His story is headlined, "Contamination Fears After Ukraine Loses British Tank." Welcome to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, Phil. Can you start off by responding, although you're in Britain, to the U.S., what looks like the Biden administration decision to send DU munitions to Ukraine, and tell us what you found in your expose with the British tank that was just destroyed?
Thank you for having me, Amy. So I think Biden's decision to send tanks with depleted uranium to Ukraine has been made possible in large part because Britain led the way on this. If you remember back in January, our Prime Minister here, Rishi Sunak, announced that Britain was going to send these 14 tanks. And that was at a time when it was controversial just to send tanks. And that helped cross the red line. And after that, we saw countries like Germany announcing that they would send much larger quantities of tanks to Ukraine. And this has really been Britain's role throughout this war, has been to kind of up the ante and to lead the way on weapons supplies to Ukraine, despite the kind of escalatory fears about what effect that's having on the battlefield.
I disagree with him a little bit here because the thing is, I think the U.S. government would have chosen to send those weapons regardless if the UK sent the tanks or not. Because let's go back to the Leopard tanks decision. Let's remember it was a couple of months ago when Germany announced that they were going to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Now, remember, the German people, the majority of the people in Germany were against that decision. But the Greens in Germany agreed with it because they felt that pressure from Joe Biden. So it was after Joe Biden announced that the U.S. would be sending those Leopard tanks. Then Germany said, okay, well, I guess we need to do this because they felt that amount of pressure because Germany is an ally with the United States. So I disagree with him here. I think this would have happened regardless if the UK did this or not. Just keeping it real.
So starting with anti-tank launchers back right before the invasion, to then tanks, to more recently even cruise missiles. This seems to be the role that Britain has played in the conflict, and it makes it easier for other countries like Germany or now the US to send much larger quantities of weapon systems that were once considered controversial. Now, the reason that depleted uranium is so controversial is because it's essentially a byproduct of nuclear waste, and it is radioactive. The UK stockpile even contains some trace amounts of plutonium. And much of this was made in the 80s and 90s, and the stuff that we've been sending out to Ukraine, some of it may even have expired. But it was used.
Did you guys hear that? That was the piece, another piece I wanted you to hear. Some of the things that they've sent out is already expired. Guys, this is a death wish. They are sending these people to their death. That's really what this is. This is insane. And I'll continue to talk about this because I really do believe, don't be surprised if a year from now, maybe next year, don't be surprised if they're still losing on the front lines, on the battlefield. Don't be surprised if next thing you know, there's the call to, well, we got to send in this many U.S. troops. And that'll affect American soldiers as well. These weapons that they're sending over there.
Most notably in the Gulf Wars in Iraq. And there's been a long concern there about birth defects and cancers linked to the use of this ammunition in Iraq and also in the former Yugoslavia. And so when I revealed back in March that Britain was actually sending this ammunition with its Challenger 2 tanks, there was international outcry. Farhan Haq, the UN Secretary General spokesman, came out and condemned the decision by the UK to supply these weapons. And Russian President Vladimir Putin, quite predictably, used it as a pretext to send so-called tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, which brought the Europe and the world one step closer to nuclear confrontation and the catastrophic consequences that would flow from that. So even before these weapons had been fired in Ukraine, it would already had an adverse implications for international peace. Now, the British Ministry of Defence says that there's a low risk to human health from using these weapons. And it says it's necessary because depleted uranium is an ultra-dense metal that's able to punch through tank armor in a way that other munitions aren't able to. So it's made as essentially a dart that's fired through enemy tanks. But this justification is slightly undermined by the fact that the UK military also likes to point out that Russia is increasingly having to use very antiquated tanks, including T-62s that were made in the 1960s, and even some armoured personnel carriers that were first fielded in 1954. So the UK military is kind of trying to have its cake and eat it with this argument, saying on the one hand, Ukraine needs very advanced anti-armour weapons, whilst at the same time highlighting that Russia is using very antiquated weapon systems. And even though some of the more recent Russian tanks...
You wouldn't have to worry about Russia using more advanced weapon systems if you would have just gone along with the negotiation in the very beginning. When they tried to negotiate, we wouldn't be in this situation. But again, you have to remember, there's no money in peace. There's profit and a lot of money when it comes to war. But we wouldn't even be in this situation. You wouldn't be hearing about Ukraine. And it's really funny to me because some Americans still don't even know where Ukraine is on the map. But they're all like, I was driving the other day. I was on my way home and I'm driving and I saw like these Ukraine flags like at the end of someone's driveway. And I'm just like, really? It's just interesting to me when these events happen. All of a sudden, everybody cares about this country where they don't even know where it's located. Some of them probably didn't even know that it existed. But we would not even be in this situation had they agreed to negotiate in the very beginning. We would not be here. But that's not what it's really about. This weapon package that has been sent to Ukraine, it shows you again, this is another example that you can show to your friends who continue to repeat that narrative that it's about saving the lives of Ukrainians. You can show this to your friends and show them if they really cared about the lives of Ukrainians, they wouldn't send weapons over there that are going to cause them to have cancer or birth defects. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't have sent cluster ammunitions, which could obviously affect civilians, right? Because it's not a specific target. Show that to your friends and your comrades who are repeating those talking points. So as I've said before, and I'll continue to say, it is not about the lives of the Ukrainian people, just like it wasn't about the lives of the women and the children in Afghanistan. It is about implementing some type of regime change against Vladimir Putin and removing him from power. And Ukraine, this was the US government's and NATO's perfect way to make that happen. That's ultimately what the end goal is. Whenever we hear about these wars, we have to ask ourselves, what is the end game? Mainstream media is going to tell you the end game is to save the women and the children. But you see the women and the children, dying on TV. You see the pictures from independent journalists, particularly of the contamination that's happened to people in places like Syria. So you see the women and the children are dying. So you know it's not about the women and the children. So then you have to go a step further and ask, what is the ultimate goal? And most of the time, the ultimate goal is either resources, extracting resources from those countries, or it is to implement some type of regime change. I'll let him finish and then we'll go to the comments here.
Tanks have been upgraded so that they are capable of firing depleted uranium. The UK military is not able to point to any evidence that Putin has actually allowed his troops to use this munition type yet in Ukraine. So this is very much something that the UK has introduced to the battle zone. And the tanks arrived in April in time for Ukraine's counteroffensive, and they've been held in reserve awaiting a breakthrough. And it seems that only in the last week or so has the counteroffensive advanced to the point where we've started to see videos of these British Challenger 2 tanks in action. And most surprisingly was the footage that emerged this week showing one of them billowing with smoke after being hit, presumably by Russian fire. And this is said to be the first time that a Challenger 2 tank has ever been destroyed in enemy action. Now, I'm told that the crew are said to have survived the strike, but there's a real risk that there was depleted uranium ammunition inside that could be ignited by the fire and producing a toxic aerosol that could cause a risk both to the tank crew and any other soldiers passing through the area. The video is filmed by what appear to be Ukrainian soldiers driving downwind in a car with open windows, so they would have certainly have inhaled these toxic fumes. And the UK military's own health assessments that I've seen from the 1980s when this ammunition was invented show that they were very concerned about the risk of a fire igniting this ammunition, and they said that you would need to send in teams with breathing apparatus to deal with it. People would need to stay upwind. Anyone who inhaled it should be taken to hospital, and you'd need a contamination team to move in there and deal with the large quantities of soil that would be contaminated. Now, of course, this area of Ukraine is a live war zone. They're not going to be able to undertake that kind of decontamination efforts for some time now. And it'll be further complicated by the presence of other munitions, such as cluster bombs, which we know have a high failure rate, which can make it hard for these demining teams to go in. And what we've seen in other conflicts, notably in Iraq, is that these tank hulls litter the battlefield for many years after the conflict. Children go and play on them, thinking they're some kind of climbing frame, and they can become contaminated with depleted uranium, leading to very rare forms of cancer.
Rare forms of cancer. That's the other thing, too. Rare forms of cancer are harder to treat, right? I don't say cure because people don't really try to cure cancer. They try to treat it. But for me, it's so concerning because I've seen multiple videos of kids playing in places like in Yemen, which is also contaminated, parts of Syria, which is also people are breathing contaminated air. The United States government has honestly just, from as much as I can remember, has just basically become an imperialist international killing machine. Imagine if it happened to us. What is going to be left of this country when this is all over? Is Ukraine going to look like Yemen? Eric, if you can find, if you find me a picture of Yemen, I forgot to pull that, a picture of Yemen, what it looks like now. I want to show people the battlefield. In the meantime, Nick had some things to say about this. So Nick has been making these short videos on Hotspot along with Nico. These things are pretty cool. And it basically sums up a news story pretty quick. Listen to what Nick had to say about this as well. U.S. to arm Ukraine with toxic depleted uranium ammunition.
As Americans continue to struggle economically, the Biden administration decided to send Ukraine toxic, depleted uranium ammunition that's going to give Ukrainians cancer for generations to come. And this is right after the Biden administration approved a cluster bomb munitions not too long ago. But listen to me, you naive children. This is what protecting democracy looks like. I'm a very sophisticated news person. I'm here to tell you that in order to protect Ukraine, we must send them weapons that give their population cancer. Don't question me. A few other countries have depleted uranium ammunition. The United States is the only country that admitted to using them in conflict. That's why we know how dangerous depleted uranium ammunition is, because the United States used it in Iraq and the population is still suffering to this day. The crazy thing is the unhinged Biden administration still denies the dangers of using depleted uranium ammunition.
The CDC has stated that there is no evidence that the depleted uranium rounds cause cancer. The World Health Organization reports that there's been no increase of leukemia or other cancers and that have been established following.
These people will be the death of us, you guys. These people will be the death of us. These people are such liars.
That there's been no increase of leukemia or other cancers and that have been established following any exposure to uranium or DU.
Despite the fact that cancer rates tripled in Iraq after our use of it. In 2015, the Department of Defense even promised to stop using depleted uranium ammunition. Then we used it in Syria anyway. The United States government complained that Ukraine is too casualty averse. Now they are sending them weapons that will give their people cancer. You must be a fool to believe the United States care about the Ukrainian people.
Well said, Nick. Well said. That's why I want more people to hear about this so they can stop using that narrative, because the reality is a lot of people, they don't know about this. Eric, I'm gonna go to the comments. Let me know if you find a picture of Yemen. General of Leafy Army. Thank you, Sabby. That's absolutely correct. They should be concerned for their country. Call them out. I'm just saying, just keeping it real, you know. This is what they're doing to people in your country. Thank you for the super chat, Michael. Saw you're viral on TikTok. Your message is growing. I haven't even been on TikTok in about, I think a couple of weeks. So if I did go viral, thanks. I'm not good on TikTok. I'm not a good TikToker. I really am not. I throw things up there. I try. JB goes, so now the U.S. will use biological warfare, costing the lives of Ukrainians and Russians for generations. How many people will still suffer from the effects of Hiroshima and Nagasaki? That's another example. Danny says the UK has also docked a warship in Nigeria's port, likely in preparation for intervention against Niger. See, it's happening all across, you guys. No, not a map, Eric, just a picture of a picture of the country. Yeah, like if you search war-torn Yemen, it should pop up. Delthea says war is how Americans learn geography. Right? Isn't that crazy? It is crazy. I have to go to TikTok and see what went viral. I'm going to go ahead and take this from Roger Meadows. Thank you so much, Roger. And I have to make myself smaller, but I don't know what I did here. Oh, nope. Is this going to make me smaller? See, this is why I let Eric do this, because I'm terrible at this. Thank you. Thank you so much for the tip, Roger. Last I checked, Ukraine blowing through more artillery faster than the US MIC can keep up with. Speaking of Danny, I think the only reason why we didn't go to war with China yet is because of low enlistment. Ooh, gotta get numbers up. They don't have enough kids from working poor and working class families to go. It's not just the kids are smart, but years of no health care and processed foods made kids unfit for enlistment. This is very true. That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up, Roger. It is not just because, you know, a lot of kids are smart and they've kind of woken up and they're like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of the military industrial complex. It's also because they don't meet the military requirements, because with the military, I think they still do body taping. My dad was in the military and I've had friends that were in the military. They actually do body taping. They don't just measure like your weight. So it's weird. Like you could meet the weight requirement, but if you don't meet the requirement for body taping, then you're out, right? If you're a female and you have large twins, you may not meet the body taping. In fact, a friend of mine, she tried to join the Air Force. This was years ago. And she didn't meet the body taping requirement because she had big tatas. But Yemen, I want to show you, this is what I'm saying. Is Ukraine going to look like war-torn Yemen? Look at this. You see this? Like Yemen looks like someone just dropped off a bomb and pieced out. Look at this. This guy's just sitting here in rubble, right? Like this was someone's home. The kids, see, the thing is the people still live there. So it's not like they can just get away from it. So the kids do play around in this area. So they're breathing in those chemicals as well. Just more pictures here. Like, could you imagine like this is your backyard? This is your neighborhood. This is how people are living with this. This is very terrible. And who's going to come and rebuild this, right? Do they have money to rebuild this? Probably not, right? This is what the US government does to those countries. Terrible when you think about it. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you guys so much. And we're going to go to our next story here. So this was sent my way. Shout out to you guys who send me videos and articles and stuff. Like, again, I don't always respond to the emails, but I see them. I just get really busy, so I don't always have time to respond. But this was sent my way. So apparently there are multiple people that are running independent and third party for 2024. I've interviewed, I think, three independent candidates for president on this show. I've also interviewed third party candidates as well. And now apparently PSL, now this is the Party for Socialist Liberation. They are running candidates for president, Claudia de la Cruz and Karina Garcia for 2024. I'm going to start off by showing their announcement video. Then we're going to take a look at the website, and then we're going to talk about one of the concerns that I do have with PSL, and that is going to be ballot access, but they may have a plan. I can try to get Claudia and Karina on the show to hear from them as well. But let's start off with their campaign announcement. So let's dive in.
Does it ever feel like the political system is working against us? Like regardless of who we vote for, the outcome is always the same? We're told this country is a democracy, but more and more it feels like a corporate regime. No matter which party is in power, only the rich ever come up on top. Today, the richest 1% own more wealth than the bottom 90% of Americans combined.
On top of that, heat waves, floods, and hurricanes are becoming a regular occurrence. Artificial intelligence is threatening to replace millions of jobs, and the threat of World War III is more serious than ever. Humanity is facing nothing short of an existential crisis, and what do the two parties offer us? Culture wars meant to divide us, and breadcrumbs disguised as solutions that come nowhere near meeting the scale of the problem.
Let's just say what we all know deep inside. Career politicians and real estate moguls are never going to save us. Corporate America has two parties. Shouldn't the working class have at least one?
So what I would have said here, let me go back just a little bit, because notice when they mention,
Let's just say what we all know deep inside. Career politicians.
So they show Kamala Harris, right?
Real estate moguls are never going to save us.
And then real estate moguls, they show Donald Trump. So what they're doing here is, I think this is a good idea. What they're doing here is they're showing you that obviously the career politicians have failed the people. That's a no-brainer, right? But they're also showing you that even an outsider like Donald Trump, meaning Donald Trump was a political outsider, right? He was not a politician. Even an outsider who was a businessman, real estate mogul, who people thought would come in and would be there for the people, even they still sell out the people. Remember, Donald Trump chose to give those tax breaks to corporations, but then Joe Biden continued some of Donald Trump's tax breaks. So what she's showing you is, or what they are showing you is that we've had the career politicians, we've had the political outsiders, we've had both now from two different parties, but unfortunately the people are still suffering. So I thought that was smart. Now, what I would have, well, let me go to this part here.
Corporate America has two parties.
That part right there. Corporate America has two parties. I would have said corporate America has one corporate party. I wouldn't even have called them two, because the thing is like, when you make the distinctions there of Donald Trump and the distinction of Kamala Harris, then you tie it back together and show it's just one corporate party. That's what I would have said. But this is good so far. Let me go back. There we go.
Corporate America has two parties. Shouldn't the working class have at least one? I am Claudia de la Cruz.
And I'm Karina Garcia.
And we're running for the President and Vice President of the United States on the ticket of the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
We're not career politicians, and we don't have billionaire friends. We're educators, community organizers, and mothers.
You don't need to tell us that the working class makes this country run. I'm from the South Bronx, and we know what hard work looks like.
So they're they're working class, right? So they're not, they're not PMCs, professional managerial class. She's from the South Bronx. Now I'm gonna go ahead and say this now, though, because we had a Bronx person. We had, AOC she also said she was from the Bronx, and we know like how that turned out, right? But this is different. So far, the people that I've interviewed that are running for office, I haven't interviewed them yet, but Jasmine Sullivan, working class, right? And these two, I haven't interviewed them yet, but they're a part of the working class. So they know the struggle of everyday people. I think that's important. You just go back here.
You don't need to tell us that the working class makes this country run. I'm from the South Bronx, and we know what hard work looks like.
I know this country wouldn't last a day without the working class. So isn't it about time that we take charge?
This campaign is for all of us living paycheck to paycheck. We're working multiple jobs. For all of us who are sick of watching the rich get richer while we can't even pay our rent.
We don't just want to tax the billionaires. We want them out of power entirely. We need to.
That's a really good point. That is a really good point. I like that. Hold on, let me see.
But we can't even pay our rent.
We don't just want to tax the billionaires. We want them out of power entirely.
That part right there. Because a lot of politicians right now that are running are saying, oh, we're going to tax the rich. The rich need to pay their fair share, right? Notice they don't want to say the word billionaires. Like that seems to be taboo now all of a sudden. But what she's saying here is like, we don't want to just tax the billionaires. We want them out of office entirely. And I think people need to continue to say that. I think that needs to be, or want them out of power entirely. I think that needs to be a ongoing message. And I know Bernie Sanders said that back in the day, but Bernie doesn't say that anymore. So you have to continue to say that message.
We need to seize big pharma, seize big tech, seize the big banks instead of letting them run our government. We need an economy that puts the people before profit, an economy built to generate prosperity for everyone, not just a handful of billionaires.
This campaign is not a one-time thing. We're running to build a political organization that finally gives voice to the working people of this country.
So it sounds like they're running on building a movement, right? So they said it's not a one-time thing. And I've heard of Claudia before.
Not a one-time thing. We're running to build a political organization that finally gives voice to the working people of this country. It's time to stop going around in circles while the elites change places every 4 years. We think this country deserves a better option, a socialist option.
So Claudia and Karina, they are socialists. They are running 2024 for president and vice president. I thought they did a good job there with the advertisement, and I want to show you what their platform looks like. What did I do? Here it is. let me show you their platform, because this is the piece, like, again, like, especially like when I interview candidates, I really like to, at some point, talk about their platform. So one of the first things that I see on the list: end capitalism before it ends us. Seize the biggest 100 corporations, create a new economy for the people. Now, if you click here, it talks about the largest corporations in America should be seized from their billionaire owners and turned into public property. So this piece here is important because oftentimes I've looked at a lot of platforms, right? I've interviewed a lot of candidates. Oftentimes they'll tell you what they want to do, but they don't tell you how it should be done. So one thing I will say that I do applaud them for is they're telling you how it should be done. It should be turned into public property. I'm not going to read all of this because it's a lot here, but you guys can go through it. And then overthrow the dictatorship of the rich, build a democracy that serves the working class. And if you click on here, it says the U.S. needs a new system of government to replace the current one designed to maintain the dictatorship of the billionaires over everyone else. The main tools of the ultra rich used to enforce this dictatorship would be abolished. This includes the Supreme Court, the Senate, and the banker-controlled Federal Reserve. So one of the things they're doing that I think is a little bit different, they're calling out the banks. That's a big one. That's huge, right? So they're starting with the corruption and the money. That can resonate with a lot of people. The FBI and the NSA would be disbanded, and mass incarceration would be replaced by a justice system aimed at rehabilitation and reintegration into the community. The median income for a person in the U.S. is $31,000. But there is currently not a single member of Congress who has to experience this reality. That's true. Workers are fully capable of making the decisions and running the government. Workers already run everything else. With workers in charge, the rights of all people will finally be respected. And then they go into demand full equality for LGBTQ people in all areas of society, and national legislation banning discrimination at the workplace and in all public and private institutions. You know, it's crazy that in 2023, we still have to talk about ending discrimination in the workplace. Native sovereignty and self-determination should be fully recognized, and treaty rights should be honored. So that's a big one for those of you that are watching that are a part of the indigenous community. We want to turn the social order upside down and topple those who have all the money and power, but do none of the work. I want to talk about what they just said here about the workers, how we pretty much run everything. Think about it, guys. If it wasn't for the workers, would these billionaires exist? And we don't have that much time. We don't have that much time before they do replace a lot of these jobs with AI, and they're not really going to need the workers so much anyway, at least for especially some of these tech gigs, if you know what I mean. So the thing to me is just that it reminds me when I still worked in higher ed, you know, it's a lot of the kudos would go towards the faculty, and some were nice, some were just assholes. I'm just keeping it real. But it's like what they failed to understand until the pandemic happened and a lot of people quit en masse is that it was actually the staff who kept things running. It's the administrative assistants, right? It's also the food service employees on campus, the janitors, right? The IT people, which everybody hates for some reason. I never figured out why people were so mean to IT because everybody hates IT until your computer stopped working. And then all of a sudden you need IT. So you might want to be nice to those people. I'm just saying, but you can't do it without the workers. You really can't. So we have more power than we realize. We just have to get people to come together in the rule of money and lock up the corrupt elite. Oh, people are speaking my language when they say in the rule of money. I'm just saying. I like that. So one of the things they say here all Wall Street bailouts would end immediately. Similarly, millionaires and billionaires should no longer be allowed to buy elections through lavish donations. All campaigning should be publicly financed. So they're calling for public financing of elections. That's huge. Get the corporate money out. And different loopholes like super PACs that billionaires use to get around donation limits should be immediately closed. That's really good. They're talking about prosecuting wealthy people. They mentioned JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, of course, who banked with Jeffrey Epstein. I've talked about that before multiple times on the show. Cut the military budget by 90%. Peace, not war with China and Russia. Notice they gave an amount. See, this is the one where people, when I ask people, I said, would you reduce the military budget? A lot of times, most people say, well, most people I've interviewed, okay, say yes, but they said by 90%. They gave you a figure here, and I want to click on here and just show you what that looks like. The approximately $1 trillion that U.S. taxpayers spend every year on war should instead be spent to address the dire crisis facing working people. The price of key goods, especially gas, could be dramatically lowered if the suffocating economic sanctions the U.S. government imposes on countries around the world were lifted. Everybody needs to see this. And Eric, we can put the link to this in the chat too, so people can, they're heavily against, obviously, the new Cold War against China and Russia must end, along with associated aggression like the proxy war in Ukraine, massive military shipments to Taiwan, or any and all military build up against any targeted nation. This is huge. We demand the abolition of NATO military alliance and AFRICOM. Again, we're not going to go through all of it, but I'm reading the real big key points that I think you guys want to see. In the war on Black America, here we go. The struggle for Black freedom brought millions of people into the streets in 2020 in the most massive social movement in the U.S. history. The enormous uprising was an outraged response to the fact that a war has been waged on Black America from every foundation of the country, from slavery to segregation to systemic racism, including decades of neoliberalism and mass incarceration that have left the country even more unequal and segregated. Reparations and the rebuilding of Black communities are essential to fully address the consequences of this war. The seizure of the 100 largest corporations, many of which historically profited from slavery, will provide ample resources for cash payments, along with huge investments in services and infrastructure. So those of you in the chat who usually ask this question when we bring up reparations, but do they agree with cash payments? Yes. And they're thinking the corporations should pay for it, which actually makes sense because some of these corporations made a lot of money and built huge businesses off of the backs of slavery and Jim Crow. So that's a good point to bring up. So I knew some of you, I saw someone in the chat earlier said, no reparations, no vote. Well, there you go. There you go. They got that. And then defend women's rights. Full equality for LGBTQ people. Abortion should be available without restrictions and provided for free so that women have the right to control their own bodies. Now, this goes back to universal health care, because the thing is, if we did have universal health care, I would imagine that an abortion would be free, especially if it was a life or death situation where the mother's life was at risk, right? They talk about the Supreme Court. And then it says where did it go? Oh, okay. They said the Democrats had the opportunity to codify. They're talking about codifying Roe. The epidemic of violence against women must be addressed as a top priority of society. This can only be achieved through a comprehensive approach involving programs to help women leave abusive situations and into impunity for crimes against women, and cultural campaigns to uproot sexist attitudes. The Constitution must finally include a provision guaranteeing equal rights for women. That's crazy. That's not there. That's crazy. That is not there. And of course, we get into climate. Save the planet from capitalism. Woo! To deal with the disastrous effects of the climate crisis, society must urgently transform the way we produce energy, grow food, and move around the world. We jump down here. Fossil fuel corporations should immediately be taken over by the public and repurposed to generate renewable energy. Capitalist agriculture is enormously wasteful, especially when it comes to water resources. The vast land holdings and technological resources available to the agribusiness corporations would be seized and turned over to farmers who would implement a democratically determined plan to reorganize food production on a sustainable basis. Public transportation will be massively expanded with a fleet consisting entirely of electric vehicles, and the huge scale of this undertaking will ensure that no auto worker will lose their job. Massive infrastructure projects need to begin immediately to make society more resilient to the changing climate. So, I think most of you know what I'm already going to say when I talk about what I did not see. And I'm going to go back up to the top just to double check something right here. I'm going to check the top too. This part right here. You guys know healthcare is a big one for me, right? That's a big one Sabby care about. As education as well. I noticed something here. It said quality healthcare, not universal healthcare. So I don't know if maybe they do agree with universal healthcare. I would like to interview them to talk to them about this. Maybe they do agree with universal healthcare, but what kind of threw me a little bit was quality healthcare. What does that mean? So that threw me. Yeah, I don't know what define quality. So I'm not sure about that, and that's a little odd to me that a socialist campaign doesn't mention universal health care. So that one did jump out to me. So there's that. And then there was another one here, jump down here, when they're talking about the median income for every person, and they talk about the new socialist system of government based on direct exercise of power by the workers, true democracy, and da-da-da. So I think, again, when they mention the median income for a person in the U.S. is $31,000, it's good that they put that. But what I also noticed is when we talk about a living wage, I didn't see a living wage. I didn't see increase the minimum wage. So those are two things that did stand out to me. And someone was mentioning in the chat, the jab. I didn't see anything about that either. Now, they just announced, sometimes people do make edits to the websites not too long after they've announced. They have just announced, so we'll have to just also keep that in mind. But they did have good things listed here, but not seeing universal health care was a big one. I kind of, that one, I'm going to try not to look at the chat. Joe said red flags, Joe, in the face to go with it. I'm kind of surprised for a socialist campaign not to have that on the platform. So that was weird. Interesting. Now, there is an issue with PSL, and this was something that I did search for. So I searched to find out how many ballot access they have. So PSL, so I did look this up, PSL on the ballot in 13 states nationwide, but this goes back to 2012. Let me, it's here, hold on. This goes back to 2012. I could not find anything more recent. And I looked for hours. I looked for hours trying to find out how many states they have ballot access in, right? So what I found was 2012, they had 13 states. So let me show you the states. And according to this, in 2012, they had Arkansas, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Utah, Vermont, Washington State, and Wisconsin. And now, the states that have a star or an asterisk next to them, like Colorado, Iowa, Utah, Wisconsin, it says here, in those states, the PSL has stand-in candidates because those states' ballot access requirements prohibit the names of Petalenzzi and Yaro Osario from appearing. Again, this goes back to 2012, and that's who was running then. So it could be different today. But I'm assuming, like she said, we're building this organization. I'm assuming they have a plan to increase ballot access, just like Green Party has a plan to increase ballot access with Dr. West's campaign, just like they did with Jill Stein's campaign. I'm assuming that's part of the plan. I don't know until I interview them, because as it stands right now, I couldn't vote for them based off of this list here. Now, if there's someone in the chat that is a part of PSL or you know more about this, please let me know, because this is the most recent I could find. And I looked at Ballotpedia and everything. Ballotpedia just redirected me back to the website. So just an FYI, if you guys know, or tell me on call-in tonight if you know a little bit more, because I'm trying to find out if they had access in more states. But yeah, so those two young ladies, Claudia de la Cruz for president and Karina Garcia for vice president, they are running through PSL for 2024. The only thing I know about PSL, other than the socialist part, is someone did tell me that PSL is like DSA light. I don't know. I really don't. But maybe you guys can tell me more, okay? I do know also they seem to be pretty close with Answer Coalition. So what's up, B? What's up? B said Caleb Maupin had a whole ass rant about PSL last night. Well, I guess I should have watched that before I did this tonight. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, B. Sorry, guys. All right. Okay, let me go to some of the comments here. Thank you, GDNPB. Endgame is the takedown of the West dollar and euro to BBB. Build back better agendas 30 and 21. Banksters always use wars. Thank you, Joe. Hold on. Former Dems who said Cornel West should ditch MPP for the Green Party because ballot access are now supporting zero state ballot access, PSL, because Cornel West hired a former Dem. This is interesting. We're about to get to that story, Joe. We're about to get to that story. Very interesting. But that, your profile picture is cracking me up. Thank you, Cryosynth. On the Liberation News website, an article from July 15, 2022, Supreme Court deals blow to worker safety with ruling against jab mandates. Ooh. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Cryosynth. I'll have to look at that. Thank you, Roger. Reparations Marcel will be on Larry tomorrow. I'll check that out. Thank you for this as well. Didn't hear public banks or national CBI for federal law and U.S. Constitution. Yeah, I didn't see that either. I'll try to interview them and see. Thank you, Miss Me With It. The UN and the WEF are going to implement universal health care. Interesting. 1 second. That one made me cough. I'm sorry. The UN and the WEF are going to implement universal health care. I'd rather have none. Garatuas at BRICS red flag. Oh boy. Yikes. Well, that's news to me. And thank you, Ozzy. 1 million each for reparations equals 46 trillion. Thank you, Ozzy. Woo. Okay. We're getting to the heated discussion. So, man, where do I start? If you have been on Twitter within the past 48 hours, you've probably seen this, especially if you follow Cornel West or the likes of Peter Dow. Now, about 24 hours, actually 48 hours ago, I believe, Dr. West announced on Twitter that he is adding Peter Dow as his campaign manager. Peter Dow, some of you may remember him. He was campaign manager for Hillary Clinton. I believe he also worked with John Kerry's campaign at one point. But a lot of people know him just now because of he was Marianne Williamson's campaign manager and he stepped down. Now, we'll get into all that in just a bit, but let's start off with the announcement that Dr. West made that sent some people into a tizzy. Dr. West said, "I am so very blessed to have my dear brother Peter Dow as my campaign manager. I welcome him to our campaign and movement. We will work together for truth and justice." And so here's the official announcement here. If you click on it from the Cornel West campaign, it says that presidential candidate Cornel West today welcomed Peter Dow to his presidential campaign in the role of campaign manager. A respected activist, advisor, writer, and musician, Dow has more than 20 years of national political experience and was described by the New York Times as one of the most prominent political bloggers in the nation. He has advised major progressive organizations and has held senior positions in several Democratic presidential campaigns. Dow has been an independent since 2020 and supported the Green Party in the 2020 election. So I want to pause there for just a second. Actually, can I come out to make this bigger? Yeah, it's actually bigger if I do it this way. Because this piece, I'm not sure if everyone is aware of this. Some of the rumblings that were on Twitter, some people were like, whoa, now this guy is pretending to be a Green, right? Because he came from Marianne Williamson's campaign. Marianne Williamson is running as a Democrat in the Democratic Party, and now he's a part of the Green Party. So some people saw this and they were like, wait a minute, what is this guy trying to do? Is he being an opportunist, etc.? Is he trying to sabotage the campaign? Some people, and I'm just telling you some of the things I've heard, some people feel as though he is trying to basically be an infiltrator and hurt Dr. West's campaign. Some people believe he's still a Democrat. Some are saying that he has not changed, but this is something I did want to announce to people just so people are aware. Apparently, he's been an independent since 2020 and supported the Green Party in the 2020 election. So I did just want to go ahead and add that part. Now, so as you can imagine, people were very upset. People, not everybody, but people were upset. And people see it as a sort of betrayal, so to speak, right? There's more we'll get into about Peter in just a second. So a lot of people lashed out at Dr. West. And then it was announced that it was actually Dr. Jill Stein that recommended Peter. So I want to go ahead and bring this tweet up here from Dr. Jill Stein. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So she said, newsflash, it was me that brought Peter Dow to Cornel West. Why? Because I learned how essential an experienced campaign manager is from my campaigns without one. So I don't remember who Jill Stein's campaign manager was. I think I was trying to remember this the other day, but I guess what she's saying is that she didn't have an experienced campaign manager. So let me go ahead and finish here. He's the most experienced campaign manager I know with independent/green politics and strong opposition to the duopoly. She goes on to say, though I didn't know of Peter Dow in his days as a DNC defender, it's not hard to see how a worn, torn, bloody childhood led to fierce opposition to Bush and bondage to the Democratic Party. So she's talking about the wars because Peter Dow is originally from Lebanon. So she's talking about the wars that I guess kids had to participate in back then. I think they were teenagers actually at that point. If only more liberal apologists would have this kind of wake up. Then she goes on to say here and says, with an experienced campaign manager, our team can give Wes the support he needs to break the duopoly and give all those thrown under the bus a reason to fight back. So this was a shock to, I noticed a lot of people on Twitter that Jill Stein was the one that recommended him. And I think that, you know, I haven't had a chance to talk to Jill about this, but I guess her perspective is that he was a part of the Democratic Party. He left the Democratic Party and he supported Green Party in 2020. And he's really trying to help break the duopoly. So she's saying basically he is one of the best campaign managers. Give him a chance. The adversaries are saying, but Peter Dow lost, right? So that's another thing people are pointing out is that, yes, he was a campaign manager for Hillary, campaign manager for John Kerry. Those are the two I know about, but he lost. So that's what some adversaries are saying. Now, so this threw people for a tizzy. When people saw this, they were like, what? Right? So I choose not to react to these types of things because the thing is this, I wanted to wait until I found out more information. I don't like to, how can I say it? You guys know how I am, right? I usually try to find out as much information that I can before I discuss it, right? So I don't like to just go bah! Without finding out more info. Now, here's my take on this, and then we'll get to the other tweets and clips here in just a second. We'll bring up the Peter one. This is how I feel. Would I have done that? Would I have selected Peter given like me knowing like the history? And yes, people can grow and people can change, but my concern is not just so much of the history. My concern is some of the things that I've heard from people that have worked with him more recently. So that's my more so concern, right? We go back to 2016. I mean, obviously, like I was the Bernie supporter, supported Bernie in 2020. I had to think about like my own political awakening. I didn't leave the Democratic Party until after Bernie 2020. So, you know, I voted for Bernie in 2020. We all have our different wake up periods, right? So that's why for me, when people were talking about he worked with Hillary Clinton, I'm like, okay, but I mean, I kind of get it. I get it. But people do have their differences, like when they wake up. But the problem that I have heard from those who have been in spaces with them is that they do feel like it's an opportunistic thing. And then there's this issue with Marianne's campaign. Now, I want to go ahead and talk about this. Peter was Marianne's campaign manager. Peter stepped down. When he stepped down, he announced on Twitter that he was stepping down because he was taking care of his parents, I guess his ailing parents, that type of thing. At that same time, or like maybe the day before, Jason Call also announced he was stepping down from the campaign. So of course, there were rumblings. We were trying to figure out what is going on with that campaign, right? So what it looks like is that, and this is something I would try to get Peter to understand as well. You were just a part of Marianne's campaign, and Marianne is running through the Democratic Party. You step down from Marianne's campaign and you say that you don't have the time to run a campaign now because you have the issue with your family. But then you jump into another campaign and this time it's in the Green Party. So there are going to be people are going to have those concerns. People are going to worry. People are already saying that the Democratic Party is infiltrating the Green Party. This comes from some people with experience of this, right? Like, so there are some people that were like, there were people that infiltrated Bernie's movement, and they see this happening. Some people said that there were Dems that infiltrated MPP, although MPP had his own issues. But there were people that also said there were infiltrators that were part of Movement for a People's Party. So I think the thing is that Peter may not, maybe he does understand, but the thing that Peter, if I could say this to Peter, would be people are very skeptical because of what has happened with the Bernie movement and Bernie selling us out, the squad selling us out. The threshold is so much higher now. So where you may have had a little bit of leeway 5 years ago, people are not willing to have as much leeway now because of what has happened. And then there are some of the things that were done. And so I'm going to show you past and I'm going to show you present. This is one of the things that people were pointing towards. Now, this was Peter back in 2017. He said Bernie's movement became a hate mission against one woman with people throwing dollar bills at her on the street. Heinous and sexist. Now, yes, that was 2017. And yes, he was coming from that Hillary Clinton campaign. But for those of us that were the strong Bernie supporters, we remember people calling us, people from Hillary's campaign calling us sexist, even the women, even calling other women sexist, Bernie bros. You guys don't want to vote for Hillary because she's a woman. We remember all those things. And so let's say we get past that. Let's say we get past that and Peter realizes this was a mistake, yada, yada, which is what he has gone on to say. And I'll put this up here. This was posted August 1st of 2022. When I was a relentless Hillary Clinton advocate, I went after third-party candidates as spoilers. I was dead wrong, and I'm sorry. A healthy democracy should offer a plethora of choices, not just a corrupt duopoly. So that's from 2022. That's last year, right? So Peter realized, I guess, along the way, like, you know what? That was messed up. I shouldn't have done that. And third parties candidates were not spoilers. But it wasn't just the third party aspect. It was also the Bernie aspect, which I just showed you. So it wasn't just about third party. It was also about those that were Bernie supporters as well. And Bernie ran in the Democratic Party. So it was on both sides, right? So I wanted to show people that because that is from last year, because some people are saying that, oh, he's just saying this now. He's been saying this for quite some time. But I think, again, where people hit the pause button is when Peter, oh, Eric, are we on a second page? Did you put the other ones on the second page? Okay, maybe you did. We're not going there yet. We don't have to go there yet. I was just asking, just double checking. I think that, oh, nope. Let me take that down. I think that Peter might have to understand is that coming from Marianne's campaign and she running through the Democratic Party, it gives some people the perception that you are infiltrating the Green Party. That is to be expected. Now, that being said, is that necessarily the case? No. What I would like to do is I would like for Peter to come on and to talk about this because people are angry. let me tell you, I went on Twitter, I think a couple hours ago, and I went on Twitter and people are not having it at all. Like some people are like, let's give Peter a chance, let's see what happens, yada, yada. Focus on the policies. Don't focus so much on the campaign manager. There are two different sides of this. But I think what would help Peter is if not putting this on Twitter, but if talking to the people, whether it's my show or whoever's show, talking to the people and explaining this is what happens and this is what happened. This is where I am now. Because people are going to be suspect. Like I said, people gave Bernie a lot of money, and Bernie just, he rolled over. Like, he did us wrong. And then the squad, same thing, they did us wrong. And so now it's like, and then Movement for a People's Party started, right? And a lot of people were excited about MPP, and they're like, yeah, a party for the people and the workers. And all these people got on board, right? Like, a lot of people spoke at the convention. Nina Turner was one of the speakers. And then come to find out there was issues with the People's Party. We done covered it multiple times on this show. But then people also said there were people that also had infiltrators, right? All these organizations eventually have some type of infiltration one way or another. So people are going to look at you with a side eye. Now, that being said, let me pull this over here. For the people, this was sent to me as well. And thank you to the person who sent this to me, because I forgot a lot about this. For the people that are saying that Cornel West's campaign already sounds like the Democratic Party, right? Like, they're like, he already talking like the Democrats do. Somebody sent me this, and I'm going to go ahead and issue my apology. Somebody sent me this yesterday to remind me of something, because I was also one of the people, I told Dr. West, I said, I don't think you should call one neoliberal and one fascist. I think they're both fascists, right? Trump and Biden. And people were saying that Dr. West is saying that because he's trying to protect the Democratic Party, or he's going to drop out and endorse Biden, that kind of thing. You know who else said something like that? Jill Stein did. And I forgot about that. But someone sent me this, and I just want to show you. This is when Jill Stein crashed the DNC. Listen to this. Oh, this is not at the starting point. Hold on. That should be at... Oh, no, that is at the starting point. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. I got my numbers mixed up. This is when Jill Stein crashed the DNC. I'm just going to scoot it up a little bit. I think I forgot to put the number, because they were asking her about why she was there. Listen to this.
She was in Boston, your hometown PBS affiliate. I, of course, have interviewed you before. How would you feel if your role in this election helped put Donald Trump in the White House?
What we know from history and what we know from the current situation, we are seeing a rise in right-wing extremism, not just in the United States, and it's not just Donald Trump, it's also throughout countries in Europe. What is driving this? It is policies like NAFTA, like globalization, like the dominance of the banks, like the Wall Street bailouts, like the Wall Street meltdown thanks to deregulation. Who gave us those policies? The Clintons were leading the way on those policies.
How would Donald Trump be as president?
The answer to neo-fascism is stopping neoliberalism.
Did everybody hear that part? So this, again, I want to remind you, and there's other clips that people sent to me as well of interviews with Dr. Jill Stein where she said the same thing multiple times, like stopping Donald Trump fascism. You do that by stopping the Hillary Clinton neoliberalism. So you got to stop both of them. Obviously, that's why she's third party. But I'll play it again for those of you.
How would Donald Trump be as president?
The answer to neo-fascism is stopping neoliberalism. Putting another Clinton in the White House will fan the flames of this right-wing extremism. We have known that for a long time, ever since Nazi Germany.
Dr. Stein, what do you think of Donald Trump?
Okay. I wanted to play that again. That was when Dr. Jill Stein crashed the DNC, right? So that was a pretty epic moment. Someone sent that to me and they said, Sabby, I think you forget that for those of you that are telling Cornel West, you can't call one neoliberal and one fascist. They're both fascists. I think you forget that Jill Stein also did the same thing. And then I thought about that and I'm like, well, those were two different people, right? That was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and you have Biden and Donald Trump. But I think the point that the person sent me that email, I think the point that they were making is that we had heard this before from a third party candidate, but for whatever reason, it didn't bother us the way that it did recently. And so I had to ask myself, why is that? Why is it that it bothers me more now? And back then, like actually back then, I didn't think anything of it. And I think part of the problem is because Donald Trump has served as president. Joe Biden served as president. Hillary Clinton didn't serve as president. I think that's the only difference, right? I mean, she's still corrupt in some ways. When you talk about financial issues, she's more corrupt than Joe Biden. We can go into the whole Whitewater thing when we have time. Okay, when we have some time. But I think I forgot that. And I think what has happened is that why is it that people don't want to hear that now, but we were fine hearing that back then in 2016. And I think it's because now we've had Trump and we've had Biden, and economically things are much worse right now than they were back then when Jill Stein was running. So again, this goes back to what I was saying before. The threshold is so much higher now. Now, the people, especially those of us that were Bernie supporters, it's like now you really can't make a mistake. It's like you can't just be good on the policies now. It's like people are watching every single move, and I feel like people are going to criticize you at any little thing, even some big ones. People are going to criticize you because we've already been through all of that. But they sent me that video, and I wanted to show you guys that just to let you know that this wasn't like the first time someone third party compared them that way, that Jill Stein did as well. Now, to that point, what that means is that anyone that's running third party or independent, they're going to have a much harsher time now. I think that people are going to be more critical. I'm just going to keep it real because of what we've been through all the Bernies and the squads and all that kind of stuff. People are more critical now, right? So they don't want any margin of error. The other thing that I want to add in reference to this, the ranked choice voting. This is something that Brianna Joy Gray mentioned. I think is a good idea that Cornel West should be advocating for ranked choice voting. And again, I had to remind myself, did that happen before? And it did, and it happened with Jill Stein. So let's go back to this as well.
This problem of this voting system based on fear, we could solve it with the stroke of a pen with a system called ranked choice voting. It lets you rank your choices. So if your first choice loses, your vote is automatically reassigned to your second choice. That way you can vote for the underdog that you favor.
The ranked choice voting is on the ballot in Maine this year.
That's
so
right.
Is that something you are behind?
Yes,
supporting?
absolutely. Mm-hmm. And here's another.
And you know what? That ranked choice voting passed in Maine. So the point that Bree was mentioning, that Cornel West should be, she wants him to advocate for ranked choice voting, especially being a third party candidate. We got to remember Jill Stein did that. And then Maine had ranked choice voting on the ballot that year, and it did pass in Maine. Right? So I want us to learn from the past. Like, that's the thing. Like, I want us to, let's look at some of the things that happened during 2016 and look at some of the things that are happening right now. And I totally understand. We can go to the second panel when you're ready, Eric. I totally understand like the skepticism in reference to Peter. And I think that honestly, had it been like maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe people may have felt a little bit differently. We can go to the second panel, Eric. Maybe people may have felt a little bit differently. But again, I think because of everything that people have been through, the betrayal from people like Bernie Sanders, I don't think people are willing to put up with any type of what they consider to be suspicious or whatever, right? But this brings about a bigger question. You guys can vote however you want. I'm not your mom. I'm not anyone's mom. But the question I think we need to ask, are we trying to build a third party coalition? Are we trying to break away from the duopoly? Whether that's for those of you who want to support PSL or independent candidates or Cornel West, regardless who you want to support, Is that what we're really trying to do? Because I got to show you something right here. People like Robert Reich. Robert Reich is a tool of the same establishment he complains about. That was me, and I stand by it. He's full of shit. Robert Reich is out here saying third-party candidates will help Trump win. Robert Reich said the same thing in reference to Bernie Sanders' race. He said the same thing in reference to Jill Stein. So the point that I want to point out to you is, look, we already got these people out there against us. We got these people out there against us. We know the Robert Reich, every time I turn around, he always talking about what the problem is. But then his solution is to tell you to keep doing the same shit that brought you to that problem in the first damn place. So we know he's a tool of the establishment. So we got the Robert Reichs. But now we also have so-called what used to be left independent media also falling in line with the establishment. The ones who told you fight for Bernie Sanders. The ones who told you we need progressive change. The ones who told you not to vote for corporate politicians are now telling you to vote for Joe Biden. So we have so many things against us, like the majority report. Here they go. They want you to vote for the Democratic Party.
This CEMEX ruling by the National Labor Relations Board. So much of what's going on in the labor world is being stoked, if you will, and accelerated and enabled by rather unsexy changes that are taking place at the National Labor Relations Board. We've had two different organizers of the successful union drive for Amazon out in Staten Island. Both said the ability for them to organize on Amazon grounds was a huge key to being able to get that union. We've heard.
So you see what they're doing here, right? Okay. See, they all got the same PR talking points. What they are doing is they're trying to use unions and the NLRB as an excuse to tell you to stay within the duopoly. You guys see this, right? This is the excuse that Crystal used during that debate with Bree and Kyle. They're trying to use this to tell you this is why you need to vote for the Democratic Party, because of the unions. Let me tell you something, people. People have been organizing. People have been going on strike for decades before an NLRB. When I interviewed the postal workers on RBN for the labor strike, or excuse me, the labor summit that we had, there was a gentleman on there that had worked with the New York Postal Office for years. He told us that their strikes were actually even bigger back in the 70s. What you see happening right now, this is small compared to what they had decades ago. So pay attention to this, because this is what they're all trying to do. They're trying to use unions. Now everybody's all about this, big on unions and workers now. You notice that? We love unions. I ain't never seen them at no picket lines. Let them finish.
This from almost every organizer that has come on that has had a successful union drive. That was a change that the National Labor Relations Board made 2 years ago, maybe 3, right when Biden got in, 2 years ago, I guess. And this CEMEX ruling is huge. It's going back to a doctrine that existed in 1948 that essentially gets us not quite the card check, which we needed statutory authority to do, and we didn't get under the Obama years. We would never get it under this Senate. No way. Not possible. But it's like a card check light, where if workers in a shop vote to unionize or just sign a card to unionize, all of a sudden, all the benefit of doubt is with those workers. That is a big deal. The reason why, as much as Joe Biden touted that he is a labor guy, the reason why he had to tout that he was a labor guy is because he had to prevent Bernie Sanders from gaining steam in the 2020 election. Sanders.
Think about what he just said.
Really set it up going into that election to support unions. And part of their, sort of the way that Joe Biden got Bernie Sanders on board with his candidacy were probably certainly not written out terms on a deal, but I'm making a commitment to strengthen union protection in this country. And yes, Biden has fallen short of that on the railway workers, but in more structural ways. We have seen a departure from the last 50 years.
Yep.
Both relative to the GOP and relative to Democrats.
And relative to Democrats.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this in antitrust too, but in terms of unionism and the reason.
So again, that's Majority Report. They're going to tell you to vote for Joe Biden. Prepare yourself for this. There's more. Here's Cenk Uygur, TYT. Okay. Cenk Uygur is going to explain. He got issues with Cornel West third party run as well. Cenk Uygur is going to sit up and explain for you. He's going to make excuses for the Democratic Party. So independent media, the so-called progressive media that told you like stand up and fight for Bernie Sanders, all these people are sold out. TYT, you got to remember, they took Katzenberg money, and you don't get $20 million to tell people to fight back against the system, okay? If somebody giving you $20 million, they're not going to let you be on air there supporting a third-party run, something that's going to disrupt the duopoly, considering the fact that Jeffrey Katzenberg is also friendly with Nancy Pelosi, all right? You see where I'm going with this? Listen to what Cenk said.
I don't think it's complicated. He did a fake elector plot. It was an outright coup. Risking that lunatic fascist coming back in is unacceptable. So when we're going to a general election, I don't think the third party candidate is helpful. And so, by the way, I'll be called an establishment shill for that by the right wing and people on the left pretending to be on the left, but actually are right wingers. And say, oh, no, let Trump win. That'll be helpful to what? What will it be helpful to?
You see what they're doing? They all have the same talking point. Don't support this third party run because you're going to help Donald Trump win. MSNBC says that, CNN says that. These people, we cannot continue to think that they are different. They're not different anymore. They are going along with the establishment talking points. So you got to fight against this. So for those of you that want to do a third party movement or want to support third party, I'm not telling you have to support Dr. West. You can support who you want. But I am telling you, if that's what you want to do, you already got to fight back against the mainstream media establishment. And you got to fight back against these so-called independent people that have fallen off. And they just threw their hands up in the air and they caved and said, you know what, it's easier just to tell people to vote for Joe Biden. Even though we told you guys for years not to support corporate candidates. Now it's okay. Now all of a sudden the money doesn't matter. You guys notice this? Now all of a sudden money in politics is not a bad thing anymore. They don't care about that anymore because they got money in their pocket. So when you're getting a lot of money in your pocket, it's easy to tell people, yeah, don't think about the money in politics. Just support the $1 million, support the corporate candidate here who's taking money from big pharma. Medicare for all don't matter that much no more.
Nothing. By the way, this poll that I'm about to tell you makes both of my points for me, which is currently right now, Biden is losing to Trump by 2 points. But when Cornel West is in the race and they do that same poll in a poll out today, then Biden's losing by 5 points.
But the problem is, if Joe Biden was doing a good job as president, he shouldn't be losing to Donald Trump without Cornel West. See, that's what they're not saying. Losing by 2 points, losing by 5 points. Cenk Uygur, all these people are going to tell you to vote for Biden or whoever they end up replacing Biden with. They're going to tell you to vote for the corporate candidate that takes corporate money from big pharma and from fossil fuel companies. That's who they're going to tell you to vote for. And I say it like this, and I said it before. If you're a leftist, you should not be supporting corporate candidates, period. I don't care if you sit the whole election out, but you should not be supporting corporate candidates, especially all the people who are climate activists. You care so much about that. You should not be supporting these candidates that are getting money from fossil fuel companies. But they're going to tell you to do that. All these people have sold out.
With almost no chance of winning. Now, it's a long time from the election, but if the election were held today, Biden would definitely lose to Trump because of the third party candidate, okay? But that leads to my second point, where Bernie is totally wrong. We're not in the general election. We're in the primary right now. So you're saying at this particular time there shouldn't be a competitive primary because Trump might win. Well, couldn't you have said that in 2016 and 2020? Now, I know Trump has gotten worse and worse as we've gone along, but that would have eliminated you. They would have said, and they did say, oh, Bernie, this is not the right time. Let Hillary win. Let Biden win. Let some establishment goon win. You're mucking things up. They're not now, Bernie. Trump is running. They literally said that against you. So no, you should be in favor of a massive primary against Joe Biden by a strong progressive. And
see, these are the limitations. They limit you. Okay, so because if you really wanted to challenge the duopoly, Cenk Uygur would tell you to support a third-party movement or independent movement, not to tell you to support a strong primary challenge in the Democratic Party so that they can do exactly what they did to Bernie Sanders. Cenk Uygur already knows this. He is paid to tell you to do the opposite. And we have to understand that. There's a lot of money attached here. And let me keep it real. They ain't making the kind of money I make. Because I'm not sitting up here as with no millionaire dollar wealth. Cenk and Anna, these people are millionaires. So they are paid to have those talking points, to keep you where you are. It is now their job to take the progressive community and to move them to the right, to keep them as a part of the establishment in the Democratic Party. They're paid to do that. And nobody else can tell me different. When they took that money, $20 million from Jeffrey Katzenberg, that's what they were paid to do, because they knew that Bernie Sanders, especially after he got cheated the first time, they was going to do that to him again. And in the end, they were going to tell you, you got to support the corporate Democrats.
one of the reasons is the poll I just gave you. The brother's going to lose. Even without a third-party candidate, he's going to lose. And so this is the time to back the worst establishment candidate that is now polling 15 points lower in different polls than he was when he won the election. And we're going to walk into that ambush because you and Joe are friends? No, Bernie's totally wrong at this point in time.
But Cenk is also wrong as well. He's trying to make it seem like he doesn't want you to support Joe Biden, but that's what it's going to come down to. RFK Jr., Marianne Williamson, they've already rigged it against them. The DNC already changed the rules, saying that they have to get 80% in Iowa and New Hampshire. Otherwise, if they don't, their super delegates go to Joe Biden. So they don't have a chance there. So there's that. And Cenk Uygur knows this. And that's why I'm telling you, they are misleading their audience, making them think that there is going to be some significant primary challenge. They know there isn't now because they changed the rules, and they're going to use that as an excuse to tell you to vote for Joe Biden. Now, here comes Anna. Anna says her biggest problem with Dr. West's campaign is that elected progressives don't have a plan. This makes no sense. This makes no sense what she says here. Listen to this.
There have been some actions taken that we disagree with. We don't think they're strong enough or progressive enough, but there have been some actions taken that have been fantastic, including the NLRB and the makeup of the NLRB, which consists of individuals who actually take labor protection seriously.
You see what's happening here? They all got the same PR talking points. The NLRB, there's been some great concessions. The NLRB, Crystal Ball, the NLRB, Sam Cedar, the NLRB. We can make a song out of this. They all got the same talking points. This is how it used to go back in the day too. This is how it went back in the day. TYT would say something, everybody else got to get on board. That had those progressive shows. TYT would say something, then you'd see Secular Talk would say it, Humanist Report would say it, National or Rational National would say it. They all had the same talking points. And typically the memo came from TYT. Now things are a little bit different. There's different networks. There's different shows that started after Joe Biden won, that were not around during that Bernie movement, but we felt a burn and we were the ones who were burned. Same memo. Let's go back.
You also have Lena Khan fighting, for antitrust in the context of the FTC. Yeah, she's the head of the FTC. So there's some really good appointments in that regard. You also have Biden reworking his student debt relief program, which
You see how they're struggling to find things? They're struggling to find things. Joe Biden, what I tell you about Ukraine war, sending uranium weapons to Ukraine that is going to cause cancer. That's who people should vote for. The child poverty, we're going to cover this on Thursday. The child poverty rate has actually increased now. It's increased under Joe Biden's presidency. That's who you should vote for? The guy who can barely walk and barely talk. That's who they want you to vote for?
Has been fantastic. I just spoke to family members in Florida who happen to be Republican voters. They just got their student loan. Well, they just got significant relief in their federal student loans. And they're like, oh, maybe Biden, right? Do I think that Biden?
They ain't say that shit. They did not say that shit.
Came up with those ideas himself? Hell no. Biden's the one who passed the bankruptcy bill. He's the one who championed it, which made it impossible for students to ever get rid of their student loan debt, even in the case of bankruptcies. I think that Bernie Sanders has had some influence over the executive branch with Joe Biden in it. So I think that might be informing
the student loan debt cancellation, which they all continue to lie about this. That pressure actually came from activist groups on the outside that were pressuring Joe Biden about that, not from Bernie Sanders. Yes, the squad brought it up, but that heavy pressure came from the activists on the outside.
Some of the commentary that we're hearing from Senator Sanders, I get the frustration in regard to progressives not getting everything they want or even close to everything they want. But I would just venture to say that progressives maybe need to get their act together and have a strategy in place and actually think critically about how they move forward to accomplish the policies they purport to care about. Because
they say this as though the progressives are actually listening to them and do what they say to do. They know the progressives are not going to do these things. They know that those progressives are in, they got their seats. They're now a part of the same system that they were supposed to fight back against. So Anna is full of shit. They know these things are not going to happen. This is what I'm telling you. All these people come next year. Somebody clip this. Come next year. They're going to tell you to vote for Joe Biden. Watch.
Right now, I see a fractured, flailing, pathetic progressive wing of the Democratic Party that is not thinking critically of how to strategically move forward. And that's the issue I have here.
But that has nothing to do with Cornel West's run. That has nothing to do with third party run. That has nothing to do with independent run. And I want to say this loud and clear. There is no progressive wing of the Democratic Party. All those motherfuckers are establishment Democrats. And excuse me for the language, but all of them are. That's it. They all then sold out. They all bought in. They got their seats. They got their tickets. Let's stop trying to pretend like these people are separate. They're not. TYT is desperate to keep that audience, particularly the audience that they gained from those Bernie Sanders campaigns. That's why they keep saying, well, if they just come up with a strategy, if they just do this, they'll be all right. If they just do that, da da da. They've been saying this for like the past, 2-3 years. Nothing has changed. Jink and Anna, mark my words, going to tell you to vote for Joe Biden.
Anna, well, then you're criticizing Bernie Sanders for pathetically not having a plan.
Well, I do have criticism.
Forward.
I do have criticism of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, I think, is seen as a leader of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. He should act like one and get people together, progressive lawmakers together, to think of a plan. There is no plan. That's my problem.
No plan by anyone. So Bernie introduced $17 minimum wage bill. Hey, at least he's doing something, and that's way better than almost anyone else in Congress. So I give him credit for that. But we've got to do nuance.
So let me just say here, they know Bernie Sanders is not going to do that. They've said this multiple times. Again, some of this is about, I'm gonna keep it real. Some of this is about keeping an audience, and I'll be damned. Because the thing is this, look, let me put this up here, sorry. Whoopsie. Because the thing is this is why I tell people, don't put all your damn eggs in one basket, okay? What's different about this channel, it was not around during the Bernie campaigns. This was after Joe Biden was elected, actually. So it was 2021 when this channel started. So I wasn't part of any of that Bernie stuff. I watched all those channels. I supported Bernie Sanders and all those things, but I wasn't a part of that. What you are seeing right now is some of those channels still trying to find a way to hold on to that Bernie base that they received during those campaigns. For those who realize that that is going away, they have tried to make this shift towards the right to make excuses for establishment Democrats. And I say yes, towards the right, because there is a big difference. To make excuses for establishment Democrats, to make excuses for Joe Biden, even people like Gavin Newsom, which you're going to see from Kyle Kulinski in just a second, so that they can get part of that David Pakman, Roland Harris audience. It's really sad. Now, here's Kyle Kulinski. He's going to tell you, even Gavin Newsom, he's willing to accept anybody except fight and push for some type of third party movement, because that shit's too hard. Listen to this.
Even if Biden steps aside and it doesn't pan out for Marianne or RFK, but somebody who's less bad, like a J.B. Pritzker. I think J.B. Pritzker has better politics than Joe Biden. If he were to jump in and become the candidate, okay, that's good. Or even Gavin Newsom, for all of his flaws, they did do sectoral bargaining in California, which is massive for fast food workers. They did sectoral bargaining for the entire fast food industry in California, so they're going to get.
You see what they're doing? Again, even Gavin Newsom would be a great idea, because they did this bargaining for fast food workers in California. Motherfucker, have you lived in California? Have you talked to people how expensive it is to live in California? All the homelessness rate in California, how it's continued to increase. California is a state that people are fleeing. People are leaving that state, bud. People not trying to move into that motherfucker. They trying to get out of that mofo. But here is Kyle again. Let me try to use a labor reason to get my audience to support the Democratic Party. All of them going to be doing this shit next year. Watch. All of them. Anything to take you away. Whether you support Cornel West, whether you support the young women that I just announced from PSL, whether you support Jasmine Sullivan, who's running as independent, or Dr. Shiva, who's running as independent, they're going to try to distract you from all of that and tell you, vote for the Democratic Party because they're running on labor issues. This motherfucker just said, excuse my language, guys, I'm sorry, just said, even Gavin Newsom, he's willing to accept Gavin Newsom. Why are people who are so-called leftists, why are they supporting or willing to support a corporate candidate? Because at the end of the day, it don't really matter about Medicare for all no more for them. Remember that? Remember when Kyle said he couldn't support Joe Biden because of Medicare for all and because he voted for the Iraq war? Those things don't matter no more because they got paid. And I call it out for what it really is. For people saying, what's happening? Why are these people switching? Money. That's why. All these people have sailed you out.
At much higher wages. That's wonderful. They did a public option for insulin, which is phenomenal. That's going to help a tremendous number of people. He also has horrible things like he refused to sign the universal health care bill in California. But net, Gavin Newsom's politics versus Joe Biden's, it might be the case that Gavin Newsom is slightly further to the left than Joe Biden. And so if Biden steps aside, Newsom hops in and he becomes a standard bearer, that would be better. And it would also be better in the sense that I think he would have a better chance of beating Republicans, even though he comes across like a slimy car salesman, than Kamala or Biden have. Even if Biden steps aside.
You were the car salesman. He was the car salesman. So here's the thing. He told you, yeah, he, didn't sign on for the universal health care, but he's further to the left than Biden. So now all of a sudden people just ready to forego Medicare for all. They run all that shit. None of these people are credible anymore. None of these people are credible. And I keep it real. And I'm showing you all this for a reason. Because at the end of the day, whether you support Dr. West or not, it's not my campaign. Whether you support PSL or not my campaign. Whether you support independent candidates like Sullivan and Dr. Shiva, again, not my campaigns. I'm not part of anyone's campaign. What we should be asking is, are we going to build some type of a coalition towards a third party movement and some type of organizing on the ground as well? Because you have to have both. These campaigns will end. And when they end, people usually go back to sleep. This time around, people don't need to go back to sleep. People have to continue to organize. Now, Bree brought this up. Building a coalition and thinking about what are the issues that matter to you. And maybe our issues that matter to us are not ranked in the same spots. Maybe your number one issue is my number 3. Maybe my number 1 is your number 5. But if we can agree on a collective of issues, why are we fighting against each other? Because we already got to fight back against mainstream media. We already got to fight back against, apparently now, independent media. What is it going to take? Let me bring up this clip.
Who is worse, Biden or Trump? Who's more likely to cause nuclear war? Yeah. If I presented you with a pile of poop and a pile of vomit and said, which one of these you want for dinner, do you really want to enter into an esoteric conversation about which is the less appetizing meal? The whole point is that we should be united around the common goal of getting rid of these 2 bad options, of getting rid of the corporate duopoly. And when you ask those kinds of questions, it has the effect of breaking up what should be a coalition that's charged principally with getting those corporate bodies out of power. And I saw a similar kind of issue emerge over the weekend or into last week because very popular comedian podcast host Jamie Dore interviewed Cornel West, someone who's been very sympathetic of a Green Party voter, things like that. And they ended up getting into a tussle about whether or not kind of COVID mandates versus fighting racism and white supremacy is the most important thing. And again, that feels like a trap. Many people believe that COVID mandates are very important and not having authoritarian mandates are very important, and also think that racism is bad and important. If you're in the business of going around trying to make voters have the exact same, not just broad priorities, but rank them in the exact order that you rank them in, you are doing the work of busting up any coalition that could possibly be in power. It's op work. Intentionally or unintentionally, that is op work. That is like CIA applauding from the sidelines level work. Mm-hmm. If you can agree that these are your priorities, big ticket items, being anti-authoritarianism, being anti-white supremacy, being anti-mandate, being anti any of the tools that the establishment has been used to break up working class coalitions since time immemorial, then you need to say we're all going to fight on all of those things together. Maybe you are a child and you care about child care a little bit more than you care about health care. Maybe you have a sick parent, so you care about health care a little bit more than the military. Maybe you have a brother serving or a sister serving, so you care about the military industrial complex more than you care about housing rights. But the whole point is that you should be trying to get people under a big tent, not nitpicking about which thing is worse, and then busting up the coalition on that basis.
I think that's something to think about. Because this is the thing. Look, I sat there through tons of criticism about a freaking Medicare for All march. I'll never forget this. 2 years ago. And the number of people that just came in and attacked, you guys had this person, you guys had this, you had that, da da da. I don't like that, this, I don't like this, da. Something I thought all of us would have agreed on because we agreed on it before. This is exactly why the left can't. I seriously said, and this is why I'm not on Twitter the way that I used to be, because it's just all I see is everybody arguing and fighting with each other, and the left just eats itself. So it's like we don't really have to worry about, well, you still have to worry about mainstream media, but we ain't really got to worry about mainstream media and the Republican Party trying to pull apart the left. We do that to each other. That's the thing. We ain't got to worry about it. We ain't got to worry about it. You know who was attacking the marches for Medicare for All? Fucking leftists, not Republicans. There's no coalition. Everybody want to be, too many people that want to take the lead. Too many hands in the, too many people said, I'm doing it my way. No coalition. And it just, as someone who was an organizer, it's so frustrating. It really is. It's my way or nothing. So what you are witnessing, and to Colin's point, thank you, Colin, there's a difference between seeing the light as a regular person and seeing the light as a political handler. This is something that Peter has to respond to. Like that's on Peter. You gotta, and I said that, you gotta respond to this because you did this kind of move. But the thing is this, it's like a crab in a bucket mentality. Everybody, like, you ever seen crabs in a bucket? You see crabs in a bucket, right? And they trying to climb out, and a crab will climb on top of another crab to get out of the bucket. But all the other crabs still left in the bucket. Everybody fighting over, it's ridiculous. Look, you don't have to support anybody's campaign. You ain't got to do it at all. Just like you didn't have to support the March for Medicare for All. You didn't have to do that either. But what is crazy to me is when I see people, seriously, like, once again, people have ended friendships because of a disagreement on the left. It's ridiculous. So the point that Bree makes, I think, is a great one. What are we trying to do? What is the end game? Are you trying to build a third-party coalition or not? And if you're not, and that's not for you, let that be known and just keep it moving. But what kills me are the people who, they know it's not for them. They know they don't want to do it, but they'll sit online all day and just attack the people that do. Same thing happened with the marches for Medicare for All. Boy, I tell you. Let's grab the poll. This poll is tight. It is very close. Very close. Can I put it up here? Thank you. Okay. It says, will you support Dr. West with Peter Dow as his campaign manager? I'll still support Dr. West is 30%. I won't support Dr. West is 35%. And I'm not sure it's 35%. This is the closest poll I've ever had on this show. So that is very, very close. All right. Thank you. We're going to do call-in. And we're going to talk about this. And I want to hear what you guys have to say. Because the thing is, like, again, I feel like people are acting like they have a hero. I feel like people are still looking for a hero and still looking for an idol. And that's not the answer. What is the answer? And I'm going to shout this out. Thank you. Some of you have already donated because I sent this on Twitter. We are doing a food and clothing drive in Boston. Winter is coming. Please give November 18th. This was 2023. So, and I have organizations working with it for this, but we're going to have shelf-stable dry goods, canned food, warm clothes, coats, gloves, those kinds of things. So we are taking up funds for that. You guys know I've done fundraisers on here before. But this is the food and clothing drive, Boston Community Harvest, November 18th. And Rome's going to try to make it back here in Boston and be here for that. That is funded by Spot Fund because given what happened to the gray zone with GoFundMe, I didn't want to take any more chances. So I did switch to Spot Fund. I have that link posted on Twitter, so you can just click on the link and donate there if you want to. I'll also send it out in my newsletter as well. But yeah, hopefully Rome is going to try to make it. So it should be a great time. And yeah, I'm pumped. I wish more people talked about this. I wish more people talked about what we're going to do in reference to solutions and organizing and things like that instead of God. I'm going to take a quick break and then we'll do call-in. Thank you. Hit the like button if you haven't had a chance to do so.
All right. Yeah, we got a good crowd here today. And do remember, I'm just adjusting my levels, trying to make sure I'm not too hot here, audio-wise. Audio, as we like to say, is a bear. All right, so we're going to be going to call-in. Yeah, let me put the call-in link in the chat if anyone wants to do a head start.
Don't forget the super chats.
Oh, I'm getting into super chats. We got 20. Ooh. All right. Oh yeah. So I put the I put the call-in link in the chat. If you want to get a head start, you can do call-in through the browser. You can hit the link. Sabrina always makes it the posted chat as well, or you can bring it up on your cell phone. We keep hearing that Callin is going to be going away, the app Callin, but it's still kind of limping along. So we're going to keep doing it while it's around, I think, because it seems to work well. People seem to like it. All right, tonight, Callin, third-party discussion about Peter Dow and West's campaign, and we want to hear what you think about these moves, about what should be done, what is being done, and you can tell us what you think on Call-In coming up after Sabrina's little break. All right, let's dive into some of these super chats. Thanks for this one, Debs Mo. Thanks for the super sticker. Appreciate that. Thanks for this one, Wired TARDIS. Dow likes to kill Palestinians. Never trust him. Well, it's something he can be asked about, and we'll see. We'll see what he starts doing for appearances. Thanks for this super chat, Vinny. West really disappointed me in the Dore interview. The way he lost his temper. We already have two old men who throw tantrums. Thanks for the super chat, West. Vinny, I mean. Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't. I think to describe Cornel West as really going off on a losing his temper in a big way, I think is a little extreme. I think the discussion got heated. I think if West would have really lost it and got kind of, screaming and then that would have been an issue. But that's not what I saw. Thanks for the super sticker, Green Cat. Appreciate that. Thanks for this super chat, Skyzar. There's a good reason Bernie did so well. Maybe you, Sabby, are the one who should run for president. Thanks for that, Skyzar. And thanks for this, DC, obvious COINTELPRO PSYOP controlled opposition. And thanks for this one, Todd. I'm keeping an open mind. Peter may have left MW because he wanted a fighter. MW wasn't it, and he really wants to take it to the establishment. Yeah, I mean, I think, who knows what happened there, but it was clear that Marianne Williamson wasn't going to do it, that much. Thanks for this super chat, DC. Chilean fascist Augusto Pinochet was championed as the father of neoliberalism by Milton Friedman, influential economics professor at University of Chicago. Thanks for that. Thanks for this super sticker, John Chrisman. And thanks for this very generous super chat, Cuba Sea Coalition. When it comes to foreign policy, I wonder if Cornel West will stand with Cuba against the inhuman blockade the island has endured for 60 years. I know Claudia de la Cruz will, as she has spoken at many of our events in solidarity. I mean, I do think it's a no-brainer that Cornel West would be in favor of ending the embargo on Cuba. I think that's pretty well established. But thanks for the chat, and it's definitely a subject that should be discussed and questioned. And thanks for being a YouTube member for 25 months, Delthea Simmons. Oh, please, these people couldn't spell NLRB last month. Now the NLRB is the center of the effing universe. Jeez, you said it, Delthea, and hopefully we'll hear from some more from you in the call-in. You're always great when you call in. And thanks for the super chat, Staccato. Just by having Peter douche, I'm out. Thanks for that. And thanks for the super sticker, Helena. And Colin, Sabrina highlighted this one. Thanks for that. DC, thanks for the chat. Do you support the impeachment of Joe Biden? It's a good question. And thanks for the super chat, Staccato David. Where do they find these fake polls? In my 41 millennial years, I've never been polled. Mainstream stands for nothing but self-interest. I think he was talking about the poll that was in the in some of the shows that Sabrina was talking about. And it's a good question. I think it's possible to do a really good poll. But these days you'd really have to figure out the skewing with the landlines. And it's also very easy to just do a simple poll and just do landlines and get the opinions of people who are frankly rather old and still have landlines. So I think you'd really have to dig into a poll and how it's done to even know, but it's certainly very easy to skew, put it that way. And I think there's a lot of that happening in corporate media. Thanks for this super chat, Jorge Alberto. Sabby, I messaged Peter about coming to your show. He says he knows you and he likes you. He just posted something on that subject. I just tag you. Sorry for the initiative. No worries there. Jorge, and hopefully we'll see Mr. Dow on the show soon. We'll see what happens. Thanks for this one, DC. Progressive Indie Media's consolidated like the AP, which I think he means the AP, Associated Press or something.
Yep.
And Delthea, thanks for this. If these people were good faith actors, they'd be telling the Democratic Party to do better, not trying to guilt citizens to vote Dem regardless of what the Dems do. Be that better or worse. Thanks for that, Delthea. I get down to the end here. Skyzar, the DNC has been sitting at our chair for too long. It's always been the one playing us the hardest, at least with Republicans. You know who they are. Yep. And thanks for this one, Sean Hurl. Solidarity from Scotland, Sabby, peace and socialism. And we do have a couple of things on the rock fins.
Cool. Someone said they tagged me. Okay. Jorge Alberto. Yeah, because I mean, it's just like Peter got some explaining to do, and it needs to come from him.
All right. Let's see what's on. Kick that around in the old rock fins. Roger says later for inviting him. Oh, wait, is this the second one? No. Later for inviting him on your show, Sabby, feed him. Oh, this if he's on his show. Feed him to the Rottweilers and Pit Bulls. Invite him on call-in. We hungry. Damn it, we need red meat. It bothers us more now than before, Sabby, because with each passing year, the stakes get higher and higher. Plus, we have more indie channels. Plus, each year we have more indie giving us info. Where back then we had TYT and Door was still with them. So our info was more centralized than decentralized. And thanks for this one, Roger. I can say, yes, Kyle, Crystal Cedar, these are good things. Lena Khan within I trust in NLRB enforcement, but they're not transformational. Can someone tell these third parties that haven't been a threat since 68, the last year they won a state via the Electoral College vote? Anna bragging about how the NLRB is taking NLRB talking unions while sitting next to a union buster, laughing my ass off. I'd let Trump win just to see another Cenk meltdown.
I forgot. Yeah, Cenk was a union buster at TYT.
Roger, bringing it.
For those who don't know. Yeah, Cenk was a union buster. That's what I told you. This is all just a scam to get you back into the Democratic Party. That's why they're talking about the union so much.
Well, things is heating up. And the last thing I just want to say is if we focus on corruption, it's, the thing I'm working on, MCDS, money, corruption, demands and solutions, then this whole idea of like, which is the bigger fascist, Trump or Biden? Well, it's a silly discussion. I mean, what do you do with that if you win the argument? Whereas if your argument is, are they both corrupt? Are they both unacceptably corrupt? The answer is, well, yeah, of course they are. And then obviously you got to talk about, why is that happening? How is that happening? Our demands as far as getting the big money out, and then the solutions, how you get the big money out, the public financing, and you're going to have to do something with the Constitution to fix that. Otherwise, Supreme Court's going to strike everything down. So focus on corruption.
I just saw your message. I just updated it. Thank you for telling me. Someone just told me, said, why is it scheduled for tomorrow instead of today? So I just Let me update the link just to make sure the link hasn't changed. I just I don't think it has. Okay, no, the link is still the same. Sorry. Thank you for whoever said that in the chat. Someone shouted out and said, why is it scheduled for tomorrow instead of today? Okay, we can head on over to call in, guys. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Oh, and I want to show you something. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. See, keep up the fight. See you on call in.